No worries. I was just looking for the roll call agenda, Summer. I don't have one.
Is Kalen not coming, or is he fashionably late?
Kalen's not coming for the workshop.
Okay.
What's that?
I thought I was talking over you for a second.
Oh. No. We're still waiting.
Okay.
We're waiting for the thumbs up from Summer. We're just waiting for our AV system, our YouTube. Okay. Awesome. Thanks, Evan Clapper. All right, everyone, welcome to this pre-council workshop. Today is June 22nd, 2021. It is 6:03 p.m. and we are joined here, both the City Council and the Grand County Commission, to be part of a joint workshop with the Mill Creek Community Collaborative presentation. So, Cara, without further ado, welcome. Introduce yourself, do the introductions, and commissioners and council members, I'm not going to have us go around and introduce ourselves unless anyone's burning to say their name. But I just want to say again, welcome to our chambers, and thanks for coming tonight on your week off. It means a lot to me, so thank you.
As long as I don't kick over the screen that y'all get to see. Okay. So my name's Cara Dornwind, and I've been asked to be the spokesperson for the Mill Creek Community Collaborative. Is this working? It's supposed to be. Okay. I just want to make sure, because I realize I can go on for a long time and no one could hear me.
It sounds maybe not amplified, but maybe.
Okay. Okay. Do you want me to pause for a sec, or just keep going? Okay. I just wanted to check because you warned me this was all new. It's different to see everybody in person. Anyways, I have been asked to give this presentation on behalf of the Mill Creek Community Collaborative tonight, through my role with Rim to Rim Restoration, who acted as the sort of scribe for this group over the last few years. For those of you who don't know me, I've lived in Moab since about 1993 and been involved in various things related to Mill Creek since 1995. And this has been an interesting process on a lot of levels. So you all know how things have changed in Moab. You know how many more people are here and how much crowding that's creating. These photos are from last year at Power Dam down at the end of the Powerhouse Lane, and also over at the Highland Subdivision area. And there's also just a lot more people. Yes, you used to be able to drive a vehicle up to this location long ago, but it'd be rare that you'd see this many people there unless it was someone's birthday or something. And I bet most of these people don't know each other. And that has a very different impact on the canyon than period. This is like a regular occurrence, and you all know these things. Just sort of setting the stage for some of the discussions that have been going on. It also leads to other resource issues that, as far as emergency medical services and search and rescue, and then those extractions and assistance events mean that there are other damages that can occur to the natural world out there. And then it also has resulted in a need for even more ongoing maintenance work. There's stuff that's been going on up that canyon for a lot of years. It's been ongoing. There's stuff continuing today through various organizations and collaborations, but it's needing more and more. And so is that sustainable? Not in the meaning of the word everybody, but is that something we can keep doing? I don't know. So this slide will show up a few times tonight as we go through the process that went on here. There were discussions that started between the BLM, the city, and the county nearby neighbors, other nonprofit groups and whatnot. Probably earlier than 2015, I talked to a few people and got some sense of like, well, when are sort of the first real emails you saw going on? And 2015's probably conservative. It probably was earlier than that. And then when Emily became mayor, she decided that it needed to be a more formal focus group to try to get something done, because lots of talk, but not a lot of action to try to do anything. And it's a tough problem. That's not blaming anyone. That's not anything. So through that, a number of stakeholders came together. This is a list of all the different organizations. There are more than, this represents only about 17, but there's more in the sense of the number of people, and some of these entities had multiple divisions or departments that were involved. So it was a large group of people with a lot of different perspectives and really looking at all of these different impacts. So after that stakeholder list was identified, the group went out, spent some time walking around up in that Powerhouse Lane area where sort of the most acute issues are going on, and worked through figuring out, like, what are we really trying to do here? You know, it's kind of an important step. And this is the mission or the vision that came out of those discussions. There's a series of goals. There's a website that has all of this, which I'm sure a lot of you have been able to look at. So there's a series of goals, but the real crux of it is that it was a need to really address impacts on the natural world, impacts on the plants, impacts on the creek, impacts on the soils and crusts. And so most of what I'm going to talk about from here on out is about managing people, it's about trails, it's about all these things, but this is the why. This is the why we need to do this. So after we went through that process with just that smaller group of stakeholders, there was a desire to involve the community more. And this was back in 2019, there's a 19 in there somewhere, when we all could meet regularly. So we did meet a lot, and we set up a website. The web address is up on the top there. It's a free site, which is why the Wix site portion of it. We set up a Facebook page, because it does seem like Facebook is a pretty important way that people communicate in this town. And we put together a survey in 2019, as well as a number of articles. And really, there were lots of discussions with all of the stakeholders. It was a lot of talking. And that first survey, for good or bad, was set up to kind of mimic or be very similar, comparable to a survey that was done in 1996 that pretty much showed some of these same things about what do you think is important about Mill Creek? What are your biggest concerns when it comes to the canyon? What do you like to do? Those honestly haven't changed much in about 25 years. What had changed was that survey, that community process resulted in gee, let's just not tell anyone. And it actually worked. I mean, went to hotels and different places and got people to pull pamphlets. The BLM was great about not promoting it, not having commercial permittees up there, all kinds of things. And that worked until maybe, I don't know, 8 or 10 years ago, when social media and Google and AllTrails and all those things started becoming how people investigated what's going on. And so the thing that really changed in that 25-year period, from what I could see as far as public understanding of things and public concerns, was that it's time to do something different. Just not telling anyone doesn't work anymore, because we can't not tell anyone when Joe Chicago shows up and shares it with the world. And I know this is not unique to Mill Creek. We all know that. So after we went through that process of gathering more public input, or gathering some public input and kind of looking at what people were thinking, we then talked about creating zones, because or not creating zones, but thinking about the place in terms of zones, because what happens in town, the Urban Creek Zone, is very different from what happens up in the canyon. You know, that Urban Creek Zone is much more of a transportation corridor. It's more of a connection between existing city parks. It's an urban recreation environment. It still has a creek. There's still important needs for that creek and that riparian area, but it's not the same as up the canyon. That orange area is what we were calling the front country. And that is sort of from the trailhead, the Power Dam, Potato Salad Hill area trailhead, all the way up to the North Fork Falls, which one participant over the last several years came at the end to be calling the delicate arch of Mill Creek, the thing that everybody has to go see. And so that creates its own set of issues because, of course, like Delicate Arch Trailhead and Delicate Arch, all these people want to go there and then they all are walking this hike and it creates issues. And then you have the yellow zone, which is that we're calling it more of a middle country zone because it's still very close to town. It's still very easily accessible. It's used a lot by local folks with their dogs to walk themselves, just to get out. It doesn't have the same pressures as that front country zone. And then that green area is sort of the place that really requires some commitment to get to one way or the other. And is much more of an experiential location, a much more experiential part. Very different from the other zones. But we wanted to think past the acute problems at Power Dam because we wanted to avoid what was termed in an early meeting whack-a-mole land management, where you kind of deal with a problem here and it pops up over here, and then you go, oh, well, we'll deal with that, and then it pops up over here, and you're just constantly, we actually had a whack-a-mole out when we did do some public interactions out on the Market on Center. So in 2020, started out great. We had all kinds of meetings. We had a lot of meetings in early 2020, actually. And we were able at least to get together and really talk about some management options, visions different people had of like, well, we could try this, we could try that. And then COVID, and it became like, oh, how do we deal with this? And so it took, as you all know, a couple of months to figure out how to deal with it. And, well, okay, we're going to have to meet remotely. Oh, okay, now what does that mean? Gee, we really wanted to involve people and have public meetings. How do we do that? So we came up with expanding the website substantially, doing another survey rather than being able to do it in person, and more articles in the paper. And then when the city started the Market on Center, that became a really nice way of being able to talk to people and play whack-a-mole, especially with small children. That was great. The survey did have its problems. It definitely was hard to navigate. It was a time commitment, you know, just like you'd normally go to a public meeting or a public workshop that might take a couple hours for someone to run through some things, show you different options, have discussions and talk. Well, we kind of had to put that on the web, and then you had to sit by yourself and, you know, or do it with some friends or whatever. And then the survey itself also had some issues. Just a little bit hard to use. It was long. So we did our best to talk with people and help them through those things if they reached out. We still managed to get over 400 people responding to the survey last summer. And there are all these tallied responses and different things, and all of our meeting notes are on the website. This is one of the links to there, and there's loads of detail. As I move through these different things, I'm giving you just a snapshot. You don't need the all long detail. So these were the options that were presented that were developed by the group and then presented in the survey. These were not meant to put these things exactly there. These were meant to be concept diagrams of, well, we could do it this way. So option A was okay, here's what we're doing now. There is definitely management going on. There's people doing things to mitigate for impacts up there. But this one says, all right, well, here's what we have. And so let's work with what we have. We have a parking lot and whatnot. Let's maybe work on some connectivity for bikes and pedestrians. Maybe that could help ease some of the congestion up there. And then also, please keep in mind, as I think all of you know, there is an approved subdivision. So while right now there's maybe 15 households up there, we're looking at more like, I don't know, 150 or more in that same entrance area. So that kind of changes things a little bit. Option B, the philosophy here, or the thought here was, well, all right, one way to try to deal with this much congestion in a spot is let's disperse parking. So instead of having all the parking be concentrated in one location, let's not like make a bigger parking lot and like reclaim the whole area at Power Dam that used to be where all the buses hung out and everybody camped who didn't have a home in town. Let's instead, you know, create a park perhaps on the city property at the end of the pavement. Let's have an official parking area at Potato Salad Hill. Let's work with it that way. Let's maybe think about some infrastructure that could be done in a different way, maybe pave some things, that kind of thing. Then option C was, well, all right, let's take that concept, but let's just put all the parking on the other side of the creek. Because if we have already congestion happening going through a residential area, and then we're going to have even more residences, maybe that's the option. So that then involved a gate and a turnaround at the end of the pavement at Powerhouse. It left the Powerhouse lane open for vehicular access for EMS and search and rescue, things like that, but also for pedestrians and bicycles. And then also, a number of years ago, an idea was floated to put a bridge across Mill Creek, and the Rotary Club has recently brought that back up again. And so that idea was like, well, maybe, there could be some connectivity that way for bikes, and that could help get bicycles off of the Sand Flats Road, which is not the safest road to bike up. And then this also would allow, with one in and out, a place for a fee station, if that seemed like an idea. So that's what option C included. And then option D said, let's just make sure everybody who wants to come here can park and be here, and let's pave it all, and let's just make it all as developed as we possibly can. It basically becomes an enormous urban park. So those were the four options that were put forth as like conceptual differences. What was interesting was there pretty much was some consensus amongst people who filled out the survey anyway, that they didn't really like now, and they didn't really like the idea of turning it into Disneyland either. But, well, maybe C or B could work, maybe. But there really wasn't, strong, like, oh my gosh, we love this one option. And that wasn't the point of the options. It was just to get a sense of, and this I think backs up that whole concept of let's do something, but let's maybe not do everything. And so to give a little context before I go into the last phase, and thank you all for putting up with the presentation, this is just giving some context with other trails, popular trails that people are probably finding in part through social media, and they gotta come get that picture. And so we've got the Power Dam annually, last year in 2020, had an estimated about 143,000 people who went up there. Grandstaff had about 115,000, and Corona Arch had somewhere in the 150,000 range. So Power Dam's not special, it's just right in our faces and in our backyards. And so it's a very different thing. I mean, most of us don't go down the Potash Road every day and see how many, but when I've been down working the Potash Road, that Corona Arch parking lot is full. And when you're there on times when it's not full, it's like, why is this so big? So, and then Grandstaff, I think maybe the reason, and there's been a little bit of head scratching, like, why is that number so much lower? But there's also limited with the river there. You can only fit so many cars, and so maybe more people actually do skip it. I don't know. So finally, shifting to the recommendations. And so the group has worked on these recommendations over the last several months, over the winter. And you have a document that was provided in your packets and is available through the website. That's a 36-page document that goes through all of these in detail. So tonight, I'm not going to go through them in detail, just hit some highlights for you.
And we did print some. We've printed, I think, 5 of the presentation.
And they're out in the hall.
If anybody is interested in taking that.
So there's these different chapters or sections to the recommendations. And in order to give some guidance, because we started this in 2018. It's now 2021. Now, granted, we've had some challenges in moving quickly, but still, it's going to take time. Any actions that any of you take, any actions that the BLM might take, those are things that are going to take time, especially with BLM. They're going to go through a whole nother public process that's required, and so none of this will happen quickly. So with each set of recommendations, we also put some information in there to indicate some statements of intention, like, well, wait a minute, what is the thing we want to protect? So that way, if the actual situation has changed, oh, there's less people, right? Or there's other things that have changed, then there's more than just the, oh, do this, because maybe it won't be relevant. I don't know. We don't know the answer to that. So I'll run through these really fast. The riparian corridor had 2 components that were talked about: vegetation management and erosion control. And really what the first thing comes down to, and there's many more bullet points in here, I'm not going to bore you with all of them, but it basically comes down to designating a trail system and developing a long-term vegetation management plan. Those are the two really critical things that were put forth for the riparian corridor, and that applies throughout every zone, so whether it's backcountry, mid-country, or front country. When we shift to specifically talking about general trails and signage recommendations, again, the first one was designate a trail system. And I think the thing to remember with designating a trail system is that doesn't mean every trail has to have a sign on it, or every trail is built to the same standards. You know, you have hierarchies of trails in a trail system. The more used ones might be larger, they might be more hardened. The ones that aren't as used might just be a dirt path like this one here with the trail marker on it. But it does allow some consistency, and it makes sure that the needed environmental surveys, environmental assessments, and NEPA processes happen before our work is done. And that's a pretty critical thing that hasn't always occurred because there is no designated trail system in Mill Creek right now. And then the other thing is with signage to really make sure there's consistency so that what you see at Power Dam is the same kind of sign and same information you might see at Highlands, so that someone's getting, like if they go to both places, they're getting the same message. But also to really minimize use of signs in the backcountry and the middle country, because that's not, you know, the folks that have been hiking here since they were kids or for the last 20 years, they don't need to be told the same things, like don't forget your water bottle, or 4 water bottles. The backcountry, that zone, so now we get into the zone recommendations, and gee, funny, designate a trail system is the first one. But the idea here is it's a lower priority, and that it might not be signed or even really marked very much, but that we know where they should be so that it's easy to monitor what use impacts are. Because if you don't really know where they are, how do you know what's going on? And I mean, and we do have maps that were done in 1996 or thereabouts, with some kids from town back in forever ago when there was a teen summer work program here in town. And we tortured them by hiking them up there and teaching them how to map, among other things. And so I think it'd be fascinating personally to see that map and then look at what's happening now. Has it changed much, you know, in some of these zones? I don't know if it has, but it at least lets you monitor what's going on. Then with the middle country, designate a trail system. I think we're kind of a broken record. There are more specifics to each one of these in the document, but it still comes down to a designated trail system. And then also make sure that middle country signage backs up front country signage, and that maybe prepares people if there is some signage out there. Like I think Jim Webster told us about a search and rescue event where an older woman had gone to the North Fork Falls, had come back down, she got into the confluence of right and left hand, and she got confused and she started heading up the other fork. And it, you know, quite a while later, they were able to fight, but it was really bad and potentially could have killed her. So a simple sign like parking lot this way, you know, or power dam this way could really help, but it doesn't need to be a huge amount. And maybe a sign saying, gee, you know, kind of like the Cataract Canyon sign, maybe not quite so
Warning.
extreme, but something that's letting you know, hey, you're getting into a place where if you want help, it's going to be more involved. You know, you might feel like you're right in town, but you're really not. And so these were the elements in the front country that were talked about. So this, by its very nature, it's more complicated. There's more people. There's more landowners involved. There's city land. There's SITLA land. There's county land. And then there's BLM land. And then there's private land. I mean, there's a lot. So this zone was the zone where, and I forgot to mention earlier, in all those other zones, we had pretty good consensus across the group. It was pretty amazing with all the different perspectives, whether we're talking about Moab Valley Fire or the list just totally fell out of my head, or any of the other people that were in that room, no matter what their real focus was, there really was consensus of, no, we really want to do what's right for the canyon. So what we included in this document is when there were places that the group could not reach consensus, there's a yellow box that helps highlight what those issues were, so that then that's clear moving forward of what those issues were. So before jumping into this front country and Power Dam area in particular. Here's one more graph showing vehicle numbers, so vehicle trips on Powerhouse Lane. So this is on the gravel. I believe the BLM puts the counter on the gravel. So all of these vehicles have gone all the way up Powerhouse Lane. And so this is in addition to any residential traffic. And then it's their trip up and back. But it's interesting to note that in certain months, you're looking at almost 17,500 trips in a month up that small road. And so you're looking at, if you just average that out over that month, you're looking at 573 vehicle trips a day, which we know it doesn't happen that way. We know that, the bulk of them happen on the weekends. So maybe it's 1,800 vehicle trips on weekend days and 300 vehicle trips during the week. That's still a lot of vehicle trips on a road like that. The Potato Salad Hill access road in 2020 had more modest numbers, averaging about 2,000 a month. They varied from a little over 2,500 in May to, lower numbers in the winter, obviously. We know those also are not all in one, they aren't all spread out over every day. So those are, probably spikes of several hundred on a given day. And those are all obviously on the Sandflats Road. So if you have, say, an average of 80 vehicle trips a day, so out and back, on Sandflats that's directly related to Potato Salad Hill, whether they're biking or using the four-wheel drive. But you also are seeing at least now here's where it gets complicated, I'm sorry, but the way that the metrics are kept at the fee booth is they just count the vehicles going in. They don't count the vehicles going out. So you have 402 vehicles per day on average, or about, I think the number was 147,000 and change a year going through that booth. And so again, you're gonna have more on the weekends, but still, you have pretty heavy traffic to that location too. But that is a different kind of road. It's not through a neighborhood. It's just something a little different. So the recommendations that the group came up with, finally I get around to it, right? Is to, first off, really think about connecting the Mill Creek Parkway to Sandflats in a way that's separating that bike and motorized traffic. I know that's probably in the works in various ways, but one way that it could be done in addition to up Sandflats Road is if there was a bike route up Powerhouse Lane and across the creek. That'd be another way you could get bikes off of some of those heavily trafficked roads. And then also what came up at the very end of our process, like literally I think the last meeting we had almost, was that and you all know about this, UDOT and the city and the county talking about some kind of a shuttle system potentially. So the Mill Creek Community Collaborative suggested, well, maybe there should be a stop at the base of Power Dam, because that could be a Powerhouse Lane, because that could be a way that we could, maybe some people would be willing, if they're already walking up that road, why not take a shuttle bus instead of driving? So those were some recommendations that we came up with. And there was a little concern of the bridge from one member in the group. Then with general recommendations, trail recommendations, you probably can guess the first one, designate a trail system. And that really the critical thing at this point is, and the reason we phrased this one differently was the BLM needs to prioritize that archaeological clearance, because that's what's holding it up. And really prioritize that, especially in the front and middle country, which maybe would be easier than that whole huge area of the back country. And there's been a lot. They've only had one archaeologist for a while. So it's like, okay, we get that there's been some challenges with that, but let's go ahead and do that. And then there's a few others in here. And going back for just a moment to like why we're here, making sure beaver dams and flash floods are considered. Making sure vegetation's considered. That's the why. I mean, we want to make sure that anything that's done, this zone has the most potential to have a lot done. That would be adding infrastructure, having other unintended impacts, but making sure we're keeping the natural world at the forefront in our minds as we do that. So the BLM, throughout this process, has been going through a process of working on some coherent and cohesive trail signs. The trails that are noted on this, showing the "You Are Here" at the Power Dam and the Delicate Arch of Mill Creek up there at the waterfall, those are the trails that show up on Google Earth and Google Maps. They're not the designated trails, but that's what everybody's following when they whip out their phone and are blindly walking up the trail. So making sure they know where they are and giving them some reference points, some things, don't forget your water bottles, those kind of things, the things we all know. And then, of course, there's other signage things. And one of the other pieces in this part was to provide information about other locations with recreational use to water, and maybe not at the power dam. Maybe that's at the MIC. Maybe that's at other locations where people get their information, if they do bother to get information in person in town. So here's the area. Here's the mess, the challenging location. And this is where, everybody's seen this, but it is kind of interesting to just look at the geometry of where things are, where teacups are, where you've got the old mail trail coming down from up in the Highland area. I've hiked that more lately, and it's interesting. There are times that there's more cars parked up there than at the power dam, which is a little scary. And so that's the general area. And like I mentioned before, some of this is the area where the group really struggled and didn't have as much capacity to reach full consensus on every item. So what we came up with as a group was looking at this to shift the primary trailhead parking to Potato Salad Hill, and understanding that it's really important to consider both sides of the creek when looking at this, and the impacts on the adjacent lands on both sides of the creek, and to really work to minimize user group conflicts and minimize impacts on those neighborhoods as well as the canyon itself. And that also involved, well, I already said that, working with the four-wheel drive community and looking at how that could work. The other piece to that was then that would imply or allow for a seasonal closure or a closure full stop, and we had lots of discussions back and forth about what that might look like, and the challenges of seasonal, because then people don't remember. And I mean, I drive on autopilot. I'm shocked at how many times I drive or even ride my bike on autopilot to somewhere. I'm like, wait, I don't mean to be here. So, thinking about how that might look, and then, but also making sure that bikes and pedestrians are allowed to use that powerhouse lane access to Mill Creek. And then finally, this is the spot where, and I think somewhere back in one of these slides was something about, well, we talked about the bridge earlier, so that's fine. So this was where there really was a disagreement about whether this should be full stop moved over. So that is included in this with those different concerns. There were two that were absolutely vehemently opposed and others that were kind of on the fence and kind of like, we want to think about it more. So the other suggestion in here is that really doing a serious traffic assessment with lines back moving forward, with the massive increases we're seeing in visitors. Let's really make sure we understand what that traffic impact is up there before just saying, oh yeah, we can do this, or oh no, we shouldn't do this. What does that really look like? And then the last piece related expressly just to front country is related to enforcement. And that was a theme that came up over and over again. The Moab police chief in the early days was involved. The sheriff was coming a lot in the beginning. We had BLM law enforcement there throughout. And, there definitely needs to be coordination in that. And with this patchwork of land ownership, that can get interesting and not easy. BLM, for instance, cannot write a ticket in the city or county. They just can't. So how does all of that look? And then the county this year went ahead and has started sort of a pilot Trails Ambassador program, which I think is a great way to start, having more than just a stick, but also having more of a carrot. I recently heard a story from some friends who, they don't live here anymore, but they actually back in the late 90s, early 2000s would put on their badges from serving downtown and go up and actually tell people what to do and tell them they needed to change out of their flip-flop. It was really funny. It was a funny story I heard the other day. It was absolutely classic. And they're like, it actually worked. But again, just like we talked about in the other zones, making sure those use impacts are monitored. So we don't just blindly go forward and say, do these things, and no, we don't have to think about it anymore. We have to keep thinking about this. This isn't going to go away. We all know that. And then the very last thing, and I'm finished, is user fees also came up. And surprisingly, in both of the surveys, were not simply screamed about. There was yeah, gosh, we need to fund this somehow. Gee, I'm actually willing to pay some money. And some people, in the first survey, there were people who said, I'd pay $400 a year. I was like, really? But then there also was voiced concern of, well, but we don't want to mean that, make it that people who don't have that, like if you've got that disposable income, great. But if you don't, you shouldn't not be allowed up there. So that's much more challenging. But what we finally came on as a group is we can't solve all of that, and that is, oh my goodness, is that a long process for BLM to go through, especially if you're dealing with access points that might not be on BLM land. So we just came up with, let's just suggest, an Iron Ranger or Pipe Safe, and then those QR codes are starting to be used a lot more often for paying for parking, for other things. So there could be, if you've got cash, you can put money in the Pipe Safe. If you don't, you can use your phone and pay electronically. And so that was just suggested as something that should be considered, but it's a minimum 2-year process for BLM to go through that, so that ain't gonna happen with any speed if it happens at all. And that also was talked about that you could, if you did that, have that at any trailhead, honestly, and it could even, the other thing that came up multiple times in our meetings was that could even be voluntary, where it's like, okay, this isn't required, but hey, if you wanna help support the management of this area, throw in some money if you don't mind. So that is the user fee component of what we came up with, and I think that is it. That is the website for those who might want to go put themselves to sleep with a lot of words but some pretty pictures. And I am happy to answer any questions to the best of my ability, knowing that I'm one of a very large group.
Well, let me start us off by saying thank you very much for representing the Mill Creek Community Collaborative Group in this presentation tonight, and it's on the YouTube, so if anybody's interested in watching that wasn't here tonight, they are certainly able to watch again and also go to the website. But thank you so much for this presentation.
No problem.
And I definitely enjoyed serving as a member on the Mill Creek Community Collaborative. From start to almost finish, I pulled out in participating in the last few meetings because I wanted to be sure that as an implementation partner, the city wasn't, pushing too hard on a particular agenda. So I'm just really grateful that we were able to get all of the thoughts and feelings out on the table, and I'm grateful for all the members that participated over the past 3 years to collect this data, and the volunteers at the Market on Center that pushed for people to answer the survey during a COVID year. That was pretty extraordinary to see.
Yeah.
See so many members show up to get people to fill out what was a really long survey. But in a way, we know that the data that was collected with those surveys, like the people were, invested in the place. And so it's really significant data, which is a statistical term. Data significance is a thing. So questions, and we do have the microphone for those unmiked to be able to ask questions and be heard on YouTube. Ronnie?
So 2 questions, Cara. This may be a silly question, but it did occur to me when I was reading things. And of course, no one's decided about fees definitively. But when people were discussing it, was the idea these are basically fees for cars, or was anyone thinking that pedestrians and bikes would pay too?
So it's not a stupid question. This is where things get really complicated. The BLM can't charge for parking.
Okay.
So they can charge a user fee.
Gotcha. Okay.
That's how that works. So, but if those user fees are at parking lots, you can interpret it yourself.
Okay, I will work on that. And the other thing was, I don't know if anyone else noticed this, but a friend walking in the main stem, or also known as right hand, last week, and if anybody really wants a date, I can look up the picture on my phone and what date it was from, but sometime in the last week was walking up that section and sent me some pictures, because it was relatively dried out, they're dead fish. And do we know, was that like a fluke thing that happened, or related to fire?
I do know a little bit about that.
Yeah.
That was related to diverting water to Kent's Lake for fire,
Yeah.
and probably a little overzealous diversion would be the way I'd put that. Since I'm on YouTube.
That is fine. That is helpful. But I guess just one overarching thing, and none of us probably know yet, but with climate change and Mill Creek being a place that people flock to for water, do we have a sense? I mean, none of us really know, right? But that there's no guarantee that will remain something one can find there, right? I mean, even though we're supposed to have 3 CFS there.
Yeah, I mean, they're required to, 3 CFS through regardless of what's coming down. there was a temporary allowance to help make sure that Kens Lake had enough to keep dipping. But, you know, I'm sure some people here in the audience and at this table have stood at the confluence of right and left hand with 1 foot in hot water and 1 foot in cold water. That tells you an awful lot. So I think, and the other thing, you know, there's gaining and losing reaches throughout that canyon on both sides. And then you'll also feel the same thing in town if you stand at the confluence of Mill and Pat Creeks, which I don't know if most people know where that is, but it's actually a pretty cool spot. And so, and oftentimes there'll be no water in Mill Creek because water gets diverted for irrigation just below the power dam. So a lot of times in town, there won't be much water, if any, in Mill Creek, but you'll get to that confluence with Pat Creek and there is water. So that's definitely of concern. We opted to leave water quality and quantity out of this discussion because we didn't feel that this seemed really more about visitor impacts and recreational impacts. And so we decided the group decided that made more sense than trying to address that.
Thank you.
No problem.
Other questions about the presentation?
Could you say a little more about the involvement so far with the off-road community and the use at
Right.
Potato
Potato Salad Hill. So the off-road community was invited from day one. And I think what I noticed throughout the whole time, being one of the people sending out emails and saying, hey, you haven't been in a meeting lately, you know, oh yeah, I'm reading it. Whether they were or not, I don't know. There definitely was more involvement later in the process than earlier. And then kind of like in 2019, we paused a bit because of all of the overnight rental accommodation moratoriums, and then what are we doing and all of that. And it seemed like the town was kind of hitting a planning saturation point. I think what happened, you know, we had less involvement than I would have liked personally in developing some of these recommendations with the off-road community because there was all the UTV discussions going on at the exact same time, and people only have so much time. And so there was less involvement in the end, but always involvement. And people did, Cliff Kuntz, Doug McElhaney, and another person whose name is escaping me right now, Red Rock Four Wheelers. They all, and also, doesn't matter. Anyway, you can look on the website at the actual names in some of the lists. They all have been alerted and invited to participate, and they all have participated, particularly at the end. But perhaps not as fully as would have been really useful.
I guess I was like, is there a strong push to prioritize off-road access to that potential parking on that side, or is that something on the table that might be considered for lessening the use over there? So there were some interesting discussions that happened on that, and what we came up with was that since the access road crosses Sitla, and Sitla doesn't participate a whole lot in those discussions, but that the Potato Salad Hill feature is squarely on BLM, that is something BLM has to work out, and that's part of why the suggestion that there be involvement with the four-wheel drive community in determining how would you do that if you're going to move that parking over there. You can't just move it over there because that won't work. We had long discussions about, we could do this, we could do that, and then it all came back to, wait, but do we need to get that detailed? Or is that something that really, since BLM has to go through a NEPA process on something that significant, we should just say, you know what, you guys figure this out, and so that's where we ended up with it.
Yeah. Sarah and then Kevin, and Kevin, you can use that mic.
I guess I understand that there's lots of unknowns and that BLM has to go through their own process, but I am curious about the bridge, and if it would be located below the power dam for bikes, and access is on Potato Salad Hill, do you envision another dam or like another crossing to let people go like straight up the canyon? Because where I see the most congestion is on that rocky slope, right next to sensitive things. And, I don't know, what are your thoughts, or did you guys discuss that? We didn't discuss that at length. I mean, the road, I think for some of us, the thought was, well, the road used to, when you could drive across and you drove across to get to Potato Salad Hill, that road access is in that spot that's
below the cliff and with the cottonwoods. And so maybe that's where it would be, and then it would come up, and then you'd, somehow merge in. But the exact location was never discussed. And that was also talked about as if that's going to happen, that needs to go through a public process of its own, because that is potentially a very sensitive topic.
But another dam was never
No.
discussed, it was just a bridge.
Yeah.
Like a very simple foot
Yeah.
style, foot
Yeah.
bridge.
I guess I'll just ask another question because I have the mic. My main concern here, I guess, or question revolves around the fact that none of these options actually limit the use
Right.
of Mill Creek. So, and I know on river corridors, it's really common to limit the number of
Right.
people that visit an area. Like the San Juan
Right.
River only gets 75 people per day per permit. Was there any discussion of actually limiting the number of people on the front country?
There were lots of discussions about that, and the main reason that we didn't put that in as a recommendation was it all came down to how. And if you don't have active enforcement, if you don't have, and then the other problem you come into with particularly BLM, because it's not a river, there's so many ways people can get in, whether it's at Power Dam or up at Highland, or if they
Right.
drop in other places. It was like, how would you do this? And so we didn't end up recommending limit use. I think everyone in that room, or on the little Hollywood squares, would agree that if we could limit use, we would limit use, or limit numbers, we would limit numbers, but how? And I think it's the same for Corona Arch, it's the same for Grandstaff, it's just, we couldn't wrap our heads around the how. And so we went back to sort of, what can we do?
Yeah, we just looked at the many, if you started,
Thanks,
the many ways that people could get into the area, that if you started limiting it here, it would just be then everybody would rotate to another place. And then a big fear for me was that I don't want the access to keep going up. I want to keep that back country.
Yes, and that was the other thing that did come up.
We really want to keep a part of that people aren't just using and using and using. And we could see that by restrictions, there appeared, but the more we talked about it, that there would be more problems created sometimes by the restricting than just trying to manage.
So I think I have two short comments and a question. One comment is, there's been discussion of public lands bills in the county, and one thing a public lands bill can do is a land exchange. So if it's inconvenient, the BLM controls the parking area and they're not allowed to charge for parking, we could arrange that BLM doesn't own that anymore. I mean, it's actually, that would be a relatively simple and uncontroversial part of such a bill. I guess I also wanted to talk about the parking. It seems, I do think the numbers up there are a big problem. And the most practical way to control numbers is controlled parking convenience, which is a little bit different than saying you can't go up there, just making you have to work a little harder to go up there on a crowded day. So was there discussion in your group about overall parking numbers? Like if you're shifting parking to Potato Salad Hill, are you going to reduce parking by a comparable amount on the Power Dam side?
So that's where topics like if you put parking on Potato Salad Hill, that you'd shut the Powerhouse Lane access or the Powerhouse Lane parking lot. That did come up, and I think Jim Webster referred to it as, number control via parking or whatever. I mean, that's what they do in Arches. It's what they're, and they have rangers that stand there and, okay, yeah, you can't park and you can't park. And then they, shut down the park until people leave, and then they let more people in. We did talk about that. We did talk about part of that is enforcement, and part of that is also then not going with something like option B, where there's dispersed parking, where you're just accommodating more. But also there's still then that, what does it do if we reduce parking to a degree at Power Dam that people still want to get to that Instagram shot at the North Fork Falls? Do they all then just go to Highland? and then hike in from there. And yes, they have to work harder, but that's where the whack-a-mole came in. And that's where, because of that interface with private land so much, it's an unfortunate thing that Mill Creek, it's not just the power dam that you can access from private land, because you can get in so many locations. That was something that BLM really needed to work on a whole plan, just like they did back in the 90s of all right, how do we deal with this? And if we're going to reduce parking here, what does it do there? And how do we, and then that's where enforcement comes in. So they're all really interconnected. And no, it's not perfect. The recommendations are definitely not perfect. But we did do the best we could to try to address everything.
Well, I wasn't suggesting that they're perfect or not.
No, I know.
But and I certainly agree that if you're going to start controlling parking at the power dam, you should also control it at other nearby places. But
yeah, that's as far as we got with it, though. Yeah.
Other questions? Gabe?
Can you speak real quick again to, you mentioned the fee booth, for example, on Sand Flats Road. That would be very complicated or impossible. Can you
Well, it's not that it would be complicated so much as fees. So if the BLM, this is my understanding, and I don't work for the BLM, so I might get this a little bit wrong, but if the BLM charges a user fee on BLM land, that's fine. If the BLM charges a user fee, but they're on city or state or county land, that's not so fine. And especially if it doesn't go, so that's where it becomes more of a, well, where would you put this? How would you do it? Where would it be? So for instance, at the bottom of, a spot that could make sense would be where the pavement turns to gravel on Powerhouse Lane, but you're on city property. You're not on BLM property. And so that creates, there's just some laws that are just kind of a pain. And then when you're coming in from the Sand Flats Road, if I recall correctly, you start crossing, it's either county or city, because the county and the city own land there because of the landfill. So you start on county or city, and then you swap over to Sitla, and then you're on county or city again, and then you're on Sitla, and then you're at the BLM. Well, the BLM land doesn't start till right at the top of Potato Salad Hill, and a fee booth right there would make no sense. You'd want to have it back up somewhere else. And so it's just so it's just, there's a lot of thought that would have to go into how to do that. Plus, the other thing that got talked about a lot was, and the reason we came up with the pipe safe concept was, fee booths are not inexpensive. Fee booths require various things for the health and safety of the workers in them. And so whenever you institute some kind of process that has infrastructure like that, there's hidden costs and you may end up collecting fees simply to support the person in the fee booth. And is that actually helping the canyon? So those were some of the things that we came up with, okay, let's maybe back it up and just go, here's a more simple way to collect some kind of a fee and call it good. So I think that I'm recounting that correctly.
This was very complicated because of all the landowners, from private to Sitla to BLM to city to county. I mean, we worked on an interlocal agreement with the city and the county, so the county could give tickets if somebody was on the city, and the city could give tickets for somebody on the county, and that was at the beginning of the process, and it was very difficult.
Yes.
We could never figure out a way to do that where a BLM officer could do tickets on either places.
Right.
So the fact that this area is owned by so many agencies and private property complicated the management of it. It's made it very difficult.
Yeah. And the other thing, we did have a conversation with Brian Torgerson from Sitla early on, and he did a back of the envelope calculation of, well, all right, if you put the parking on Sitla, what would that cost? And because it's Sitla, it would require either purchasing it outright or an annual lease, and that, if I remember correctly,
The
annual
purchase
lease
was as if you were purchasing land for a hotel. So it was the highest and best use price. And so it was
and so was the leasing, so it was $10,000 a year to lease it, and it was really?
Lots, too much for a parking lot.
Yeah, so that was sort of, so a lot of avenues. I mean, while it feels like it took forever, there's also reasons it took forever.
Well, and one thing that this process really did too all of the members that participated in the process, while the recommendations are not like a clear green light, a lot of information was shared. And so members of the group really do have a deeper understanding of, you know, property lines, and we've got better documentation of who's responsible for what, and the challenges of things like fee collection. So the process was, you know, just as golden really as the recommendations. One recommendation that I did hear about the little city parcel that we have where the pavement turns to dirt.
Oh, yeah.
There's a city parcel there, and I think we've all been asking, like, how can we help and what can we do with that parcel? And so it was, you know, part of the recommendation for us to consider a turnaround. So there's something there. And
have
it's
time for one more
6.
question?
Yep, Mike's last, because then then we're done.
No, I got a mic here. So, Kari, on option B,
Yep.
it specifies that the power dam parking lot would be paved and striped, meaning that it would be clear, you would think, where you can park and where you can't. And it goes on to say that that would be used together with a trail, a walking trail, designated trail on the south side. So all that adds up to using parking availability as a turnaround, because that's the big thing right now. People would get up there and the lot would be full and they'd park along the side of the road.
Right.
So with that, with those conditions, would you expect that that problem would go away? Would people no longer park on the side of the road?
Considering all the places they park along the side of the road down near Mill Creek Drive, no. But that is one thing that did come up. And do keep in mind, each of those options was just conceptual. But one of the things that was talked about was sort of in comparison to places like Arches. When you pave, if you actually curb and gutter it, you can do more to restrain parking on the sides than you can when it's just a gravel road that goes over. You know, the paving was just put out there as an option. Paving was one of the things that was hated the most in that survey. Nobody wanted to see it paved. So that's where if you really dive into, like, because what we did is we had like 40 different options and you could vote on each one, like whether you, all the way from I love it to I hate it. And that is a fascinating read, but I did not want to bore you all with that.
Okay, all right, we're done here. Sorry, buddy.
Mayor, can we just ask you, what are the next steps? I mean, just,
Well, like Cara said, the next steps are for us to digest what the recommendations are, and then to distill them and to potentially wait for the BLM and then move forward with anything that's municipal
They will
specific.
be presented to the BLM at some point as well. We don't know when.
Yeah, so thank you so much, Cara. Thank you to the Grand County Commission for coming over to our hall for this meeting. It's really nice to see everybody. And we're going to take just a couple of minutes to shuffle around and then start our regular scheduled meeting in just a couple of minutes. going again, and we're good? Okay. So again, today's June 22nd, 2021. It is 7:06 p.m. We just exited from our pre-council workshop. It was a joint Moab City Council and Grand County Commission workshop about the Mill Creek Community Collaborative presentation items, which was in our packet. And now we are at our regular city council meeting. I call this meeting to order. Please rise and join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We are at the agenda item number 4, citizens to be heard. And we have been collecting comments over the internet via a link. Summer, I haven't looked in the past hour how many. We have 0 comments. Okay, I guess we're getting back to a new normal. But if you would like to be heard, there, as I said before, there is a form that you could fill out and then just give to Summer. I only have one form so far, but a lot of new faces. Sarah Melnikoff, welcome.
Thank you. And I hope you take this the right way. I can't believe you're real people and not just Hollywood in a sitcom. A very interesting sitcom. I just wanted to, I'm going to read something, so forgive the wooden tone, but Moab Solutions appreciates the amount of effort that went into the work of the Mill Creek collaboration. The group has done an excellent job at identifying not only what the community wants, peaceful and protected natural areas, but also the issues and pressures facing our beloved canyon. Although the issues have been identified, the best solution has not. Moab Solutions is one of several entities that do not agree with the recommendation of the collaboration. We believe it will add to pressures and environmental degradation rather than address them properly. Moab Solutions has been active in the canyon for almost 18 years. Under the direction of the BLM and in partnership with Trail Mix during the Sandy Freedy years, we began addressing serious issues. We've naturalized over 50 major user-made trails in different parts of the canyon from the parking area to Left-Hand Waterfall. During daily maintenance, we maintain the trails, trim brush, remove trash, recycling and dog waste, talk to visitors, pull weeds, paint out graffiti in buildings and on signs, ID folks damaging signs and trail work, and are ever on the lookout for the arsonist who strikes around this time of year for like the last 15 years. Sandy still helps me now and then, especially when I run into a very challenging situation and does trail work with me. And many entities under the supervision of BLM hydrologist Marie Aubry work on restorations aimed at improving the riparian area and the creek, which is listed as impaired. Besides us, Terra Sophia, Grand County Weed Department, the American Conservation Experience, and the Canyon Country Youth Corps work on projects in the canyon. We worked closely with the sheriff over 9 years ago to request that he prohibit parking along Powerhouse Lane past the pave area and asked to get the tow zone signs installed a few years later. Deputies patrol regularly and write quite a few tickets. One told me he wrote about 13 last weekend. We've also done extensive work on the Potato Salad Hillside since 2005 as part of an effort to tame an out-of-control situation during Easter Jeep Safari, and we succeeded. A whole slew of agencies and nonprofits worked together on eliminating wasting and maximizing protection of the land. It's beautiful over there. Last thing, our on-the-ground experience, outreach to the canyon community, work parties, collaborations with law enforcement and others, combines to instruct our ability to gauge how to calm the situation and keep the canyon in its most natural state while keeping it free and open to all. We look forward to presenting our alternative called A+ to the public and to the BLM soon. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. Okay, I have no more comment cards. We will move on. And if you would like to follow the agenda, there is, we now are posting a QR code outside of the door that you can scan with your phone, And so you can follow the agenda, you can click on links, and you can see the documents that the council had before them for this meeting. Section 5, public hearing, proposed resolution 23-2021. A resolution amending the fiscal year 2020-2021 budget. Is there a motion to open the public hearing?
So moved.
Thank you, Kaylin. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Ronnie. Discussion? All those in favor? Say
Aye.
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 Opposed? Motion passes 5-0. The public hearing is now open. I do not have any forms for this public hearing. Going once. Going twice. I will go ahead and close the public hearing. It is an item on our agenda later this evening, so there will be discussion on this agenda item, as an agenda item. But we will move on.
Do you usually take a motion to close the public hearing?
No. I'm happy to do so as a
No.
courtesy to the council, but we don't typically.
Okay,
I'm told it's more of a courteous motion.
got it.
Item 6, administrative report 6-1, city manager. Oh, actually, council, if it would be okay, item 6-4, the 4th of July events update. Somebody has a softball game to coach, and so I have said yes to moving that to be the first update. So hopefully that's okay with everybody. And Liz and Annie, if you want to come up to kick us off for reports. But I do need to take just a minute and say a formal welcome to Annie McVeigh, our new Parks, Rec, and Trails Director. Welcome to the meeting and welcome to Moab, and thank you so much.
I'm excited to be here.
Yeah. We did a little restructuring in terms of organizational chart, and we put a few different things under your position. Joel, I didn't know if you wanted to speak to that.
Yeah. Carly and I got together earlier last week, and we met and we put Parks, Rec, the MRAC, Mark, and Film Commission all under Annie. So that way we no longer have any floating, they're not departments because they're just so small, but any floating little groups that since Tiff had left almost 3 years ago had never really had any structured management. And Carly had been overseeing those. And so now they'll be under Annie and Annie's under Carly. So we just added that layer of having an actual supervisor so Carly doesn't have to actually supervise anyone other than department heads.
Yeah. So I don't know if you want to just take a minute and say hi and introduce yourself
Oh, sure. So,
and
good
share
evening.
fun facts about yourself.
Yes, my name is Annie McVeigh. I just started week 2 coming down from Bend, Oregon area, just in time for the summer heat. I've been working in Parks and Recreation for quite a while. I have a master's in natural resource and recreation planning. I worked for Arizona State Parks for almost a decade in a couple different capacities, the first being the state trails coordinator. So I had the privilege of making the Arizona Trail, which goes from Mexico to Utah, a reality. So that was very fun. And then moved on to be a statewide recreation planner, working with different communities across Arizona. And then moved to Oregon, where I've been managing the Parks Department for Redmond, Oregon. And I think there's a lot of similarities between the two departments. So I'm really looking forward to getting started and getting to know you and working with you coming up.
Awesome. Well, thanks. And baptism by fire. I don't know if I should say that, actually, as we talk about the 4th of July. But Liz, do you want to go ahead and...
Yes. Well, first off, welcome, and thank you for coming up here with me. And thank you for letting us go first. Okay, so new for this year, we did receive some grant funding from the Utah Department of Cultural and Community Engagement, which is why we chose to go with the title of 4th of July Beehive Bash, celebrating 125 years of statehood. And I'm just going to give you a brief update of kind of what we have in store for the 2-day event that we have. Starting Saturday, July 3rd, we're going to do our second Brovie in Swanee Park, set to begin around sunset/dark. My guess is about 9 p.m., where people can come and enjoy Ferris Bueller's Day Off. And we will have some beers available for sale from the Moab Brewery. Sunday, July 4th, we kind of have a full long line of things planned. We're going to start off at 9 a.m. with our 4-on-4 volleyball tournament, co-ed. And we anticipate that with the number of signups we had last year and where we're at about now, ending around 2 p.m., then it's kind of just jam-packed from here on out. So 12 to 4, we have the Chamber of Commerce, which I can't, and I do want to actually thank all of the city staff, and of course Lacey with the Chamber, because without them, this would be impossible. So we have a much smaller kind of activity lineup in compared to 2019, but I feel like the quality is much better. So just a quick highlight on a couple of those. We have some bounce houses. So we have an obstacle course and a large water slide that will be at the park. The Chamber is doing a dunk tank, which the mayor, I know, will be holding the spot there.
So I'm not the only one though, right?
I have. Okay. Me and Lacey haven't had a lot of time to connect this week. And I do have one fairly tentative that I don't feel comfortable sharing the name, but I've had a lot of pushback finding people who are not already made plans or out of town. So
might I suggest any member of the city council to also participate?
I was just going to bring that up.
I'm happy.
I shouldn't let the county out of here so early either.
Yeah, yeah. Well,
so yes, that is something, you know, unless you want to be there the whole time, we need to find more people. They will be doing their watermelon eating contest. The city has a pretty awesome booth, I feel like, this year. Lisa has been wonderful as far as helping me kind of add this grant element into our event. We're working on doing some Moab historical information handouts that we will be kind of handing out to the community as they visit our booth. We have electrolyte popsicles that we are very excited about. And then we have a free photo booth for anybody to come in and just get their pictures taken, all very patriotic themed inside. Some other things that we have, lemonade, we have a fishing booth, and the national park. The national parks are going to be there representing with some informational handouts for the community, and also have a cute little cutout for you to like stick your head in and be a ranger in a bighorn sheep. So we have a lunch, a fundraising lunch from the Grand County High School Art Club, so people can come out and support that. We have a beer garden that will be at this event from 12 till the very end of the concert around 9 p.m. Inside there we have a bunch of different games, cornhole, ladder ball, kind of fun activities for people to participate in. The fire truck will be coming by every hour and a half to kind of hose the crowd down. 2 to 4 p.m. at the MRAC in the like recreational room, there's going to be a bingo. What is the word? It's not a competition, but what would we call it?
It's not a raffle. It's a
game.
Yeah.
But there will be prizes and stuff that they will be handing out for the winners of that. From 2 to 7, so pretty much the whole time while the pool is open, it will be free to the public to come and go swimming in that facility. We have another fundraising dinner from 5 to 7, and this is by the Grand County High School mountain bike team. And then we have a concert from 7 to 9 by Utah Shuffle, and fireworks to follow. And I think that's about it.
Awesome. So the fireworks are still on?
As far as I know, and it's the county who is making that decision, so.
Okay. Awesome. Well, thanks for giving us the 4th of July update. It's going to be fun.
Awesome. Thank you, guys.
Hopefully we get other elected officials to say yes to getting dunked. It's not that bad. It's a way to cool down, chill out a little bit. All right. Thank you so much. Good luck on your softball game. Back to city manager updates, 6-1.
So Caitlin is out of town, and so on the Walnut Lane update, we're going to ask you guys, we'd like to set a work meeting to discuss Walnut Lane and some issues that we're having with the shortages and labor, the supply shortages and the cost of materials under the contracts that we have. And so we'd like to get a date from you guys that would work to have that work session if we could.
Yeah, so let's go ahead and actually see if we can't schedule that right now for next week. So first question is anybody not here next week? And could we look, is there a day that's better next week for anyone?
Later in the week is better for me.
Later in the week. We want to get to it sooner rather than later. So when you say later, do you mean like Thursday? Could we do Wednesday?
Wednesday, late afternoon, evening?
Maybe or maybe not. The other thing is that we want to make sure we schedule it during the workday so that Caitlin is sure to be able to attend as well.
I can do late afternoon for a little while, like
Yeah, I think I can do Wednesday.
3:30 or 4.
Wednesday, 3:30 or 4?
Yeah.
Should we just shoot for 4 o'clock on Wednesday? Does that not work for anyone? 4 o'clock Wednesday. Awesome. Summer, will you get it scheduled? Awesome. Thanks, Joel,
No
for that,
problem.
and thanks for getting that scheduled. And I'm sure that Caitlin will provide. Do you think she'll plan on providing information in a packet, or will it just kind of be
Yep.
all at the work meeting?
I think she plans on doing packet and some other stuff, so.
All right. Awesome.
And then Levi is here with Public Works.
Welcome, Levi.
Levi, I didn't recognize you in a tie.
You're so handsome.
Gee, you look nice, Levi, wow.
Thanks, Mike.
Thanks for joining us tonight.
Thanks, Mayor. We get connected.
I already have one. Do we have some of these outside?
Yes.
Awesome.
What am I doing, Summer?
We had a technology update all in this room, so we all may struggle tonight to get our stuff to work. This is all our first time.
Well, since we have so many new faces, I also want to say that he's struggling with what we call the dongle. And it's the thing that you plug into your laptop.
We
And
already
you have
got
to push
these.
the button, and it connects you to the,
Thank you.
but I always love saying dongle. I think it's a funny word.
Wrong button. All right. I apologize. Thank you for being patient.
That was really quick. You did a great job.
First off, I want to recognize Moab City Water Department. They only have 4 employees: Conrad, Yanito, Kenneth Howe, Ryan Bell, and Austin Tingy. Without these gentlemen working the hours they do, we wouldn't have safe, clean drinking water. Well, just a little bit of information on our springs and wells. We have 4 springs and 2 wells. The springs run 24/7. The wells run during high demand. The springs have an average of 1,170 gallons per minute continuous flow, and wells 10 and 6 have combined 3,430 with the springs. Our peak demand is 3,321, so we're just above that. What goes into the water report, all the sampling, bacteria, nitrates, and disinfection byproducts are tested annually. Lead and copper is every 3 years, pesticides every 3. Both of those are due in 2022. Radiation, TDS, and inorganic metals are every 9 years, and those are due in 2028. Last year, we were required to do bacteria and nitrates. We collected 96 bacteria samples. We do 8 samples a month, alternating 16 different locations. We had 0 violations last year. The nitrates, we collect 1 sample per each location, which is a total of 5 samples. We had 0 changes from last year. We reported non-detectable to 1 parts per million. It hasn't changed in the last 5 years. And prior to that, it was 2 parts per million, so it's gone down. Because of the golf course area and the fertilizing, it's the nitrates are very important because that's what the infiltration going into our drinking water. Just some pictures of the staff and some of very little of what they do. Picture of the springs. And copy of the front page of the report. Inside of the report. We went with the same layout for the last 5 years. It was designed with Moab City staff and Pipe Dream. We have a lot of help from Sarah over at Pipe Dream. The pictures came from myself and Conrad. Questions?
Council?
Hey, Levi, I got a question for you, I guess. So I'm on the Moab Irrigation Company board. Creek flows are really low. We're sitting now where we would ordinarily be sitting in August. We were sitting talking to other members of the board the other day. I first thought, well, we should cut back our users. I'm speaking now of the irrigation company. Just because, you know, Ken's Lake is really low, blah, blah, blah. And then I thought that for city users anyway, that if we did start cutting back on surface water farm, many people would elect, you know, since they have the option, to turn on their taps and water their lawns even when they didn't used to have to when we had full flow. So it looks like at first sight that we're blasé about conserving, but we're not. I mean, the idea is we're trying to conserve pristine city culinary water, and the fear is that if we cut back on irrigation water, they'll just turn on their culinary water taps more widely and push your peak limit number up over the hill here. So does that make any sense? Is that what you would do if you were me, I guess?
Using clean drinking water for irrigation is not wise water management, and we're working on that. If we don't start conserving, we have the water, and our demand is low at the moment, but we're expanding quickly, and we need to conserve now, in my opinion.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep.
Can I see the one slide again of at our highest usage and what our availability is? So our peak demand is 3321, and with all of our sources, we only have 3430. Is that correct? Is that what I'm reading?
Yes. Keep in mind that the peak demand is that's the highest rating. So we only hit that an hour a day. The average is right around 2,600.
Oh, okay.
Is that consistently at the same hour every day, more or less?
No, it's not. It depends on the year.
And does it include any allowance for fire flow?
That we would deplete the tanks rather quickly, depending on the extent of the fire. We're just a couple hundred gallons over the peak demand. So that would fall under the peak demand if there was an event of a fire. We would have an issue.
With the development of the new well, how are these numbers?
Say that again?
Isn't there a development of a new well? We're developing a new well right now.
Yes, and we're still in the early stages, so we don't know what that well will provide us yet.
The yield.
Yep.
But we've already allocated funds to change that
Correct.
delta.
Correct, yeah. And then with the hopes of the 2.2 million gallon water tank, that would help increase fire flow capacity too.
There's always water-wise landscaping and watering in the evening.
Yes.
So what, I'm just curious what happens if we hit that 109 GPMs? I don't know what the GPMs even, I mean, gallons per minute.
Gallons
but,
per
I
minute.
mean, how, like, what would happen if we surpass our peak demand?
So then we go into emergency action. We start notifying residents, conserve water. We currently don't have an interconnection with Grand Water. Once we get that in place, that would help help us with some supply there.
Well, and you're talking triage, and you might even be talking like, you know, wondering about longer-term management, you know, water management strategies and plan, right?
Yeah, I mean, I'm just, 109 gallons per minute seems like a thin
Yeah, so I mean,
margin.
with the new well 12, adding that online, hopefully we can get another 1,500 gallon a minute well, and then we would never have to worry about it. Once we add that tank in place, we'd have somewhere to put the water, and then we would meet the 2060, the master plan, the 2060 standard we're looking for, or we're shooting for.
Thank you so much, Levi.
Scary numbers.
Yeah.
You're welcome.
That's all right. We don't mind sweating. We're almost in July. Thank you, Levi.
Thank you, Mary.
Joel, did you have other updates, just general?
Nope, I didn't, Mayor.
Okay, and then we're at sustainability update.
Yep.
Carly?
And Carly's gonna do that.
And Carly, if you want to take one more minute to stab at the water, the discussion around water management.
Oh, yeah.
Work that we've been doing over the past month or so.
Absolutely. We hope to have an update for this council by July 13th. We're having a meeting with Ronnie and Mike and you this week to sort of vet that for the public presentation. You were asking really good questions. That's why the Well 12 project and that water tank project are so important for redundancy and resiliency to our system, which it's kind of operating on narrower margins than I think everyone's comfortable with. So those are underway, definitely steps in the right direction to get that infrastructure a little redoubled. So more to come in 3 weeks. I hope you're excited.
Yeah, not just in New Well, but like new policy or even bigger picture with the state.
Yes, right. We're planning to present like a big work plan that covers everything from source protection to water delivery to intergovernmental coordination to new ordinances, like a kind of 20-step process to secure a water supply, both water quantity and quality. So it'll be great.
Thanks, Carly.
Yeah, no problem. So I'm sorry, Mila was traveling today and now she's under the weather. So I'm just going to fill in and give a quick update to HB 411 and those efforts. First off, we have representation on that board.
Say really quickly what 411 is.
Yes.
We just have a lot of like faces.
New folks here, yeah.
So it might as well be worth it.
It is the Community Renewable Energy Program. And HB 411 is what created this program. We are an anchor community as part of that effort, and we sit on a board that will be making decisions about renewable resource procurement alongside Rocky Mountain Power. So we get a member on that board, and Councilmember Jones has been kind enough to volunteer to participate in that effort. It'll be a big one. We have an alternate as Mila too, as a staff member, and I think she will be working closely with Councilmember Jones when it comes to technicalities and those kinds of
Do we know the current other anchor communities? Because I know Mill Creek was like right on the edge of deciding whether they were going to be an anchor or not. Do we know if they decided?
I don't know if they did. I think they were like there were 8 possible, and they were like number 8. But all of Castle Valley and Grand County are also anchor communities, so we're really representing down here for rural Utah. And then I believe it's Salt Lake City, Park City, Summit County, and perhaps Salt Lake County as well. So we're all in good company. Just as an update, they are holding their first board meeting on July 1st. However, that first board meeting they're just having a minimum quorum meet in order to adopt electronic meeting rules. So it's purely sort of some housekeeping items, nothing substantive will happen. And then on July 13th, there will be an electronic meeting where everyone can participate. So after that, I think they're going to be doing a lot of organizing at that meeting, identifying roles and next steps. Any questions? Nope? Okay.
Thank you,
Easy
Carly.
enough. Yeah, no problem.
And thank you for being willing to serve on that board.
Yeah.
It's going to be a hoot for you. All right, we are at agenda item 7, the mayor and council reports. This is where we take a couple minutes to say what we've been up to. I first want to start by saying welcome back, Joel. It is really good to see you.
Thank you.
Let's see. I've definitely put in more day-to-day at City Hall this past 2 weeks than meeting times. But it is really nice to be back in City Hall and seeing smiling, vaccinated faces. I just want to recognize that staff has had a big year, and it really is nice to see us back to what is new normal. I mean, everyone's still very much washing hands, but it feels really good. And I'm really grateful for staff working this past year, especially core staff and in masks all day long every day, except for when they were in their cubbies. I want to say congratulations to Four Corners on their groundbreaking of their new campus at Nob Hill. That is super awesome, and it's such an important resource for our community. I got to participate in that groundbreaking. Also, thanks to Mary for hosting Kate Hammond with the National Park Service to have a personal, in-person communication with upper-level Park Service. Caitlin was there too. You'll probably report on that, but it was a very good thing that Mary hosted that, and it was really nice to be able to talk about that with her and show support for the timed entry system and the political will that's behind it. And I had plenty of admin meetings, and that's it from me. Ronnie?
Okay. I whipped out the phone. I usually don't touch this thing in a meeting, but I just want you guys to know I'm pulling up some notes because thanks to art coach Bruce Hucko and Liz Holland at the Mark, I was aware that we were going to have some of art coach's students on 400 North painting the crosswalk. And I popped by, and they're kind enough to let me get a brush dirty. And so if you guys haven't seen the dinosaur tracks and the design on 400 North just by the school, I would recommend checking it out. I'm hoping we'll see more of that going on. And I'm just going to, I had the opportunity to ask some of the students who were there painting what they would like me to know about improvements that they'd like to see in our community. And so I'm just pulling up my list here. Some of them, I have to say, were beyond the powers and duties of someone on a city council, but I thought for your amusement and also inspiration, I will share these, and thanks to Riley and Luke for sharing these. So the first one was a shorter school day. The second one was no more hotels, and then lower taxes, including the air conditioning tax. And I said, well, I don't think we have one of those. And they said, okay, well, can you just make sure that it's as cheap as possible because it's hot and we need air conditioning. And then people who work here should be paid more. We need to build more houses livable for families of different sizes. And again, go check out the artwork. It's very cool. And then, sorry, I'm a little scattered here because I have
Did any of them say bring back the Shopco? Because I get that a lot.
Oddly enough, no. But yes. I will ask about that. Hopefully the next time I can. I did get to paint a dinosaur toe. It was very exciting. And then we had our EMS board meeting today. And no surprise, we're continuing on our trend of busiest months ever. May was our, second busiest month ever on record, and June is looking crazy too. The all-time high was April. So as you can imagine, things are just crazy in terms of covering calls. And as a result of just difficulty in covering shifts and having enough vehicles and people out and trying to avoid burnout, we have kind of come to the decision, because we're having trouble filling some shifts that were part-time, that we're actually going to take some of the money we had for part-time positions to help create 3 more full-time positions. So hopefully that will help with some of those things there. The building is progressing for the new EMS building. I think the roofing is about done. Windows and doors will be going in. I know at our July meeting, I think it's July 20th, we'll be getting a tour of the building, and I have encouraged the director to talk to the council and commission about offering tours at that time. And let me just see if I have anything else of interest here. I thought this was a little interesting. I had heard that we were doing more transfers to Salt Lake City because the hospital at St. Mary's was on what they call divert, where they aren't accepting transports. And I thought that that might be mainly due to COVID, but I'm told it's in part due to COVID, but mainly because of nursing shortages. So everybody is feeling staffing crunches. And let's see, I'm sure there's more than that, but let me just not forget anyone here. Otherwise, a ton of my time has been following fire stuff, trying to share information about fires with the community. If anybody missed the KZMU radio report with the mention of firework having to be stopped because of a drone in the air, please remind anyone you know with a drone that if they're out there flying, firefighters can't, and it is actually a crime to have your drone out there trying to take pictures of a fire. You can't be dumping water or retardant when they're out there. You're endangering firefighters' lives, so please stop. And other than that, I was just going to mention, I'm hoping at some point here we'll have the opportunity to discuss fire restrictions. I've been doing research about what the city can and can't do, because the powers and duties the municipal government has is different than what the county's allowed, is different what BLM, Park Service, and Forest Service can do. And I know it's driving us all crazy because it's not consistent. So I'm hoping we'll have an opportunity to kind of clarify for the community what the Utah legislature allows us to do, and then to also educate a little bit, because there are legislators who are trying to increase the powers that communities have to restrict fireworks, for example. And other than that, I have had, just increasing concerns from community members about water, and some questions like, well, back in the day, the county council then, now commission, used to have workshops at every meeting on housing, and not like housing isn't a massive problem for us now, but are we at the point where we need to, every time we meet, be having something on water? So I'm throwing that out there because I think we're there, and sometimes we might be able to have a fire portion of our water meeting. But so thank you, everybody, and thank you all the first responders who are out there getting yourself smoky.
Thanks, Ronnie. Mike?
At a grand water meeting the other night, Cane Creek Boulevard, as you go out of town from 5th West south down that road, roughly from the place where Moonflower Canyon happened, and another 2 or 3 miles south of there, what is little known is that all the land between the road and the river is, much of it is a very narrow strip of highway commercial land. And there's a new subdivision that's going in there, which may or may not make you happy. Most people are kind of caught by surprise. Part of it will be an RV park, part of it will be residences. They have modest water rights out there, and they have elected not to get involved with the city in terms of either supplying water or processing sewer water. So they're building their own pretty high-class sewer plant. It does a good job of recycling water, and they're trying to be good citizens here, as I can tell. And the Grand Water Agency gets involved because in the end, it will probably want somebody other than the developer to operate the sewer system. So there would probably be somebody living out there who became staff, so to speak, keeping the sewer plant running. So there's that development to look forward to, more traffic on Cane Creek Boulevard for those of you that go out there very often. But I will say that the folks they're developing it seem to be trying to minimizing their impacts. So that much is good. USU, the advisory committee, which you used to be on, Emily. Yesterday we had a great meeting, one of the best we've had, and I'm going to credit Ashley Kornblatt and Zachariah Levine for really making the wheels roll. But maybe it was because Liana was late coming to the meeting; she was traveling. So we, no, I don't mean to put it down, but as we all remarked, it was kind of nice. We're all looking at each other and going, well, what are we doing here? You know, and so can we make something happen? Because really, frankly, not all that much has been happening. So the good news is we're planning to have at least 3 sessions at the trimester points at the high school to enlist local business leaders and anybody we can to trying to get the kids excited about going to school, like evidently to USU if that's the right place for you, but to do something with your lives. As Zachariah put it, focus on life after high school, okay? To which I never had a life after high school. I always had a life after college. But anyway, so that was very good. So we're going to make that happen. And we've already enlisted. So if any of you out there want to be an inspirational TED-type talk speaker and get the kids excited, that counts for everything. So. And finally, I've been, in my spare hours, I've been writing an app for Android phones. This is it, okay? You can buy lots of noise measuring apps on phones, but this one combines taking pictures of noisy vehicles. They come out, see if they're over a legal limit, and it takes your picture if you are. And if you with a cell phone interface, you could report it off to a remote location. I'm still missing, Joel, my nifty little speed limit sign, only a dB limit sign. You know, I'm still looking for one of those that would connect to this guy with a Wi-Fi port. So if you can help me with that, that would be wonderful. And otherwise, it's kind of a self-contained app.
It's not an app that our officers would be able to use for enforcement.
Laurie pointed out to me that this is a great little tool. I'm going to give away the app, all right? Because most people in town with UTVs are, you know, good folks. They're trying to do the right thing, but they have no idea how much noise their vehicle makes. So with this in their hand, they can find out. That's one way to do it. So that's it.
Thanks, Mike. Awesome. Tawny, did you make an app?
Nope. And I don't intend to. It's above my pay grade. I did 2 interviews, though. I can talk. I did an interview with KZMU along with Commissioner Hadler. And it's amazing when your interviewer talks more than the interviewees do, how quickly the 45 minutes goes. And I did an interview with the TI about housing. And let's see, I went to a Moab Museum meeting. They are purchasing a collection storage facility, which will also enable staff to have a workspace. There was a lot of budgetary information that was discussed, internal procedures for cash handling and check signing. We discussed ethical standards and professional practices, and that is kind of an ongoing project. We were presented with a 3 to 5 year financial plan, and the museum is open with no need for a reservation. If you are vaccinated, you do not need to wear a mask. If you are not, masks are required, and social distancing is required. And I would encourage you to go over and see the museum. If you're comparing it to the old museum, you will be surprised. Now, whether that's surprised unpleasantly or pleasantly, I'll leave that up to you. I think it looks very modern. It looks very clean, and the standards for the collections that are housed in the museum have vastly improved. And I also went to a Canyonlands Healthcare Special Service District meeting. I need shorter acronyms. There were just the normal nursing administration reports. Still no COVID in the nursing home. A few staff have tested positive, but they always catch them, or they always have so far caught them before they were on the floor with patients. We reviewed the budget and the financials, and we signed and approved a contract for auditing services, which seems to be the plan of the day. And I would like to thank the firefighters and the other personnel that are fighting our local fires. They are putting in really, really long hours, and their efforts are paying off. So that's it.
Thanks, Tani. Karen?
Okay, I attended UDOT's last Move On webinar series, a discussion called Connecting Communities, where subject matter experts, local community leaders, and advocates regarding how they work together to build the Golden Spoke, the most extensive multi-use trail system west of the Mississippi River, which is 170 miles long and crosses 34 cities in Utah. Some of the most sagacious advice came from Mayor Silvestrini from Mill Creek and Mayor Kafusi from Provo, and that was always to look for opportunities for multi-use enhancements when doing any construction project in your city, and that could even be, redoing a small section of a sidewalk. And always try to collaborate with varying entities, as federal and state grant funding is easier to come by when you have good partnerships with your schools, the health department, and other public and private entities. I listened to the Mill Creek presentation practice run. I listened in on the U.S. Forest Service Pack Creek Fire presentation, and like everyone has mentioned, thank you so much to the firefighters that are not from our community, who are from our community. They have stated that they've never seen conditions like this in fighting a fire, where fire is actually blowing over snowbanks and continuing to blaze. Our conditions are dire in terms of how dry we are up in the mountains. I've also been doing some research on pedestrian safe speeds for pedestrians and fatalities. And according to Zero Fatalities website, which is a UDOT endorsed goal, slowing, and this is just back to our presentation about speeds in neighborhoods, slowing down in neighborhoods at speeds at 20 miles per hour, 9 out of 10 pedestrians survive a crash. At 30 miles per hour, 5 out of 10 pedestrians survive a crash. And 40 miles per hour, 1 out of 10 pedestrians survive a crash. So that's something for us to think about when we're trying to reduce our speeds. And then ULCT sent out some very pertinent information, and it sounds like Carly will probably go over this when we have our water discussion. But the information from the Department of DNR, Natural Resources, slowtheflow.org, and Utah Water Savers, they sent information to coincide with Governor Cox's June 8th executive order conveying the urgency of the drought that Utah is in. And there is info for residents and businesses and government entities to help reduce their water consumption, as the state is really embracing the fact that we are in extreme drought conditions. And the state is offering money-saving rebates that can cover the cost of some smart irrigation control models for residents. And so you can find information at utahwatersavers.com for rebates. So, okay. And then, and attended a family service for my father. And that was it.
Thank you, Karen. Caitlin?
As the mayor mentioned, I attended a meeting with Kate Hammond, the Deputy Regional Director of the Intermountain Region National Parks, along with some folks from the County Commission. And we talked about timed entry as well as just general congestion management and other measures that might be implemented at some point to help the visitor experience, both in terms of how much time they spend waiting at the entrance, but other aspects of that as well. It seemed like it was productive exchange of information. Lacey was also there. It sounds like the Park Service is interested, but it's the federal government, and they might take them a little while to continue to have the cogs turn. I attended a Moab Dark Skies.
Before we
Sure.
get off that, just because I think it would be helpful. So it seemed like the biggest question that Kate had when we were meeting with her was, is there political will behind the timed entry?
Mm-hmm.
And so I didn't know if you wanted to speak to how we were answering that question.
We were answering that it seems like the local perception of the need for it has changed significantly since the discussion first began. Just because I think everyone's become, well, not everyone, just never say everyone, but many people have become aware that the situation is not tenable as it currently is.
Yeah.
Just with the entrance closing virtually every day, I've heard that recently the parking, I talked to someone who's doing been hired by the Park Service to do basically a photojournalism of the overcrowding and demand issues. And he said that like the Delicate Arch parking lot is full by 7, that they've been closing by 7:30. And so previously, like in the previous version of timed entry, it would be, you could drive in before 8. And so that was part of the rationale, was that it's like, oh, if you get up a little early, you don't have to deal with timed entry. But it's like, what timed entry would look like to manage the crowding is not the same in 2021 or 22 as it was in 2019. And that's not necessarily helpful for the park or for the visitor experience. So, and I think that message is getting out there formally and informally, because so the message of the participants was like the will has changed. There's still going to be concerns, but just how do we move the dialogue forward?
Is the park closed by 8 o'clock in the morning right now?
Yes, that has been happening.
So, Caitlin, I heard a rumor that the morale of the Park Service staff is shot to pieces because of all this. Is that true?
I've spoken to one person who's sort of on the ground in the parking lots, and that's what they relayed to me this spring, was like they were just a few weeks into the season and they were already feeling overwhelmed. So I haven't confirmed that, but yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks, Caitlin. What other, yeah.
One other, I attended a Moab Dark Skies meeting. It seemed like the group was really interested in what local governments were going to be doing to walk our talk in terms of getting our lights switched out. And Mila was in attendance, and she's been talking to Ben about if there's any money in the budget to at least address part of our lighting.
What year are we in our 5-year?
2.5.
Yeah.
Yeah. As well as that, the Moab Dark Skies and others also partnering to do education and outreach and their grant program for households to swap out their lighting. So, an awareness of the pending amortization period and was there. That's what I've got.
Thank you. It does imply, though, that Arches is a great place to go at night. Because if the moon's out, it's moonlight hiking, and if the moon's not, then it's great dark skies viewing.
Yeah.
There's even the viewpoint. Thanks, Kaylin. Okay, moving on in our agenda. I guess I moved it. Here we go. We are now in section 8, approval of minutes. We've got 3 different meetings to approve. Is there a motion?
I move to approve the minutes of June 4th, June 8th, and June 11th.
Thank you, Mike. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Karen. Discussion?
I sent some edits to Summer. Thank you, Summer.
Any other edits?
I did too, but they were already dealt with.
Okay, thank you. I'll call for the vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion passes 5-0. Section 9, old business. 9-1, property tax update. Ben Billingsley, our new finance director, who has a new baby, has been juggling babies and books. Thank you for putting together this property tax update, as we've been talking for several years now about why Moab City never reinstated the property tax when it was stopped in the 90s.
I think the way that we've been approaching it is good for the city of Moab. In these presentations, I think this is probably number 4. We've kind of just bit off a little bit more each time. And tonight is the real meat and potatoes if we were having dinner. We've had a few appetizers up to this point, but we're going for the entree right now.
Is this like meatloaf? Mystery meatloaf?
We'll see how it sits. I think we'll have to decide afterwards how it feels. But there should be a pop-up here, right? If it's
press
blinking.
the dongle button.
Dongle expert.
I think that we should put that as part of her title.
There, that's right. It's been too long.
Not title, qualifications. Good personality, dongle expert.
Perfect.
Should give you your message.
Yeah.
Just make sure it's plain nice. Good?
Yep, we're good.
Thanks, Summer.
So there's really 2 components of what I wanted to present tonight: an updated timeline of a proposed property tax, and then the second part of a possible spending based on various revenue targets. So I've presented a few different time calendar items, or how it would be presented. That's been refined as we've connected with the county and the state on what needs to happen to implement a property tax. State requires that we do advertisements in the local newspaper, and we will be advertising those on July 10th, 17th, and 24th. And that's not your typical legal ad. That's the, quarter or half page document with very special, very particular language based on how much it would affect the average home. And we wanted to then do an open house following the first advertisement so that, word can get out in the community, and then residents can come into town hall here in the council chambers. We're going to have an open house, and this is going to be staff answering questions to the public. The council is welcome. We can obviously advertise that if we're going to have a quorum, but we're essentially just answering questions. So basically,
Let me ask the council, do you want us to advertise it as a meeting, or are you comfortable with staff being answering questions? I'm sure if council were to drop in and out, we don't need to notice it.
We don't. Similar to meetings we've held in the past, like the UDOT meetings where you guys can come in and you can mingle. You're not sitting around discussing it. You're not making decisions. You're just attending the meeting. You're just not hosting the meeting. So it should not be a violation of the Open and Public Meetings Act.
Okay.
Thanks for that clarification. And so we'll have some posters and printouts answering a lot of the questions that we've gone over in the last couple months. And then August 4th is the scheduled date for the Truth in Taxation hearing. And that is the soonest that we could hold that, because property tax notices go out on July 22nd. And that has the date of the hearing on the notice, and it has to be 10 days following that hearing. So August 4th was the best calendar fit for that hearing. And then that first meeting in August would be the tentative date for a final budget adoption. So we would present a final budget in that meeting. And if we came to a consensus and there was approval of that budget, it could be approved on August 10th. If not, we could move into the next meeting in August. And beyond that, then there would be special meetings if there was additional discussion required. So that's what the timeline looks like in the next couple months. Maybe one other thing that I did want to touch on, we are still moving forward with the outreach programs that we had talked about, with a website, a video that we plan to share on social media, brief video, and then like a one-page summary handout. Just basically having the materials that we can share the critical information with the residents.
Ben, I have one quick question on just timeline items. If we were to approve this and approve the final budget by September 1st, would this property tax be payable in full November when the rest of our property tax is payable?
Yes.
Okay.
Oh, it wouldn't be a year from November?
Correct.
So whatever would be assessed between August, in August, whatever the assessed value is.
Yep. The
So
city
it would be that soon.
Right, it would be effective for this fiscal year. So we're adopting a budget for the fiscal year 2021, 2022, and there would be property tax revenue in that budget, so.
And is there ever like a time where you would pass a tax but then change the implementation date? I'm just thinking about like how people's mortgages have their taxes and insurance in escrow, and so people are gonna have to come up with cash in November.
Historically, no. What you adopted, like Ben was just saying, for this fiscal year, that's assessed in November and collected by the county, that's when it happens. So if you wanted to give people that heads up, you would want to essentially say, we're going to adopt this next fiscal year and give them, but until it's adopted, an escrow company or a mortgage company is not going to go adjust your escrow prior to you adopting it. So that idea is like get them to, they'd have to save it on their own. Their escrow company is not going to pre-adjust it for seeing it coming out.
Yeah, okay.
So they'd have September, October, and however long into November to come up with that.
Yeah, and the difference.
And is it for the whole year? Is it what they would be assessed for the whole year?
Yes, and the difference is just what we're assessing, right? So it's like, in your slides, do you have the housing that shows, average house and what that payment is?
Correct, yeah, and
So
it's about a 20% increase from the current tax bill based on, depending on the revenue that we're targeting.
Okay.
I believe that
$200 to $300 to $400 is what we're talking about.
And all property, whether it's commercial or residential, but then would the residential get the same 40% discount, or?
They get the 45% discount if it's their primary residence.
45? I thought it was 40.
45.
Yeah, they pay 55% of the assessed value. So they get a 45% reduction.
Got it.
So all of the numbers that when I do present a number as to average cost per house, that is assuming that primary residential exemption. So just kind of FYI. So we've identified 3 priorities for a property tax. There are so many good things that the community could do with a property tax, from affordable housing projects, sustainability. I mean, there's just so many things that we could do, but ultimately there are three of our highest priorities were identified here. Our police chief presented a couple months ago regarding staffing and his target staffing levels desired in the next 5 years. So that was number 1. And that was a 5-year target of 8 additional officers. And so in this presentation, I assumed 8 additional officers, and he presented that as the minimum desired staffing level. The next one was capital improvement projects. So these projects originated are taken out of our 5-year CIP list. And I did want to mention that year 1 is critical for this. So any funds, we've been talking about the American Rescue Plan Act, and any funds that we can come up with for infrastructure projects will be matched by that act, assuming we go through the application process. But if we have funds available to be matched, this is one-time money that essentially, is with this, we'll be applying for it this year, and if we have money, it will be matched, so our dollars will go a lot farther if we take advantage of that this year. And the third item is our rainy day fund. So we currently have about 8% of our general fund balance in a rainy day fund with a desired target of 25 to 35%. So in prioritizing these three items, I built in 3 or 4 scenarios with a $1 million annual target revenue, 1.5 million, 2 million, and 3.3 million. So I'll touch on a little bit more on each of those 3 items. So like I said, in year one, and basically this chart off to the right isn't quite as important, but what I'm wanting to highlight is what the projects are. So in year one, we would be funding the capital projects more heavily, and that would taper through year 5, simply because of those American Rescue Plan Act funds. And the projects, the high priority projects that could be eligible here are Cane Creek Road, 400 East, and you can see the list there. In red are the projects that I would recommend applying for American Rescue Plan Act dollars to fund in year 1. And so we would, at the $2 million mark, we would be able to accomplish those 3 major projects on our CIP list, which would have a really big dent on that list. That list right now it's almost so big it's difficult to try and imagine ever being able to accomplish anything on that. But if we really honed in on those in year 1, then that would be a really good step in the right direction. And the 2 at the bottom, Public Works Facility and Center Street Gym, those are projects that at $2 million we would be able to finance. At $3.3 million, you'd be able to pay cash for those improvements. Anything under the $2 million mark, we would not be able to fund those projects, given the model that I'm presenting tonight. So, and this is the police with the police department. So the police department currently has 17 full-time officers, and again, the target is 25 to 30. And the upfront costs per police officer are, you can imagine it's a lot of fixed costs. There's a lot of things, a vehicle and setting them up with all of their equipment is pretty expensive. So at the $3.3 million and $2 million mark, we are able to fully target that level with funding that a little bit earlier on the $3.3 million mark. But over at the $1.5 and $1 million, we're at the end of 5 years, either 2 police officers or 4 police officers. And the next objective is rainy day fund, contributing to our rainy day fund. And I actually did want to touch on the total dollar amounts in these projections. So capital improvements was $14.4 million in total over 4 years. The police department is $2.7 million. And the rainy day fund is $3.5 million to reach that target 35% level. So this is what I really wanted to focus on and spend a few minutes talking about. So each section is the different revenue levels. So we have, far off on the left, we have $1 million of target of revenue for property tax. And then on the far right, you have $3.3 million. And what we have here is what we're able to accomplish at each of those revenue levels. So with a $1 million target over 5 years, we could fund two additional police officers, about 1/3 of those capital improvements that I had listed. And we would hit a rainy day fund of 15%. On the other end of the extreme, you have $3.3 million, where we're essentially able to accomplish all of those goals. We have 8 additional police officers, 35% rainy day fund, and 87% of the capital improvements list that was listed there. And so kind of landing somewhere in the middle, you can see the various options where at 1.5 million, we can fund 4 additional police officers. At 2 million, we do hit that 8 additional officers, but the rainy day fund and the capital improvements list isn't quite as funded. But that said, at the $2 million mark, we have a 24% rainy day fund. We're able to fund all of the capital improvements. And if we chose to bond for those, the 2 major projects, the Public Works Facility and the Center Street Gym, we would essentially be able to accomplish everything that we could at the $2 million mark. So that seems to be the sweet spot between the tax levels. So, and then landing somewhere in the middle is that 1.5 million.
Are you going to make this presentation available? Can you email this council this presentation? So
I can,
we have it
yep.
available?
I'd love to.
Then,
And is this what you plan to present as moving forward, like at the open house?
Yep.
Okay.
It's various levels. And at the bottom there in orange, you can see the cost per month for the average home in Moab.
and that was my next question. What is your average?
The
home
average
cost?
assessed value. Again, everybody knows the assessed value is a little bit tricky because it's always below market. It's right around, if memory serves correctly, the taxable value, which is that 55% level, is 150,000, right around there. And in a previous meeting, we talked about the different quartiles and how much that would cost. That's also a critical piece to understand this as well. What on the lower 25% and the upper 25%, 75%.
You should probably also look at what it means for commercial. I mean, I know that, that we're very focused on making sure that we are sensitive to household income levels and property values. But we should probably also look at the commercial implications as well.
I've had a bit of a challenge presenting commercial property valuations because they vary so significantly.
Yeah.
Those quartiles do a good job capturing that, but you range from, like a home, about the same as a home value, all the way up to multiple millions of dollars. So that 75% level is significantly higher than the 25% level, of course. The range is just a lot more significant.
Yeah. Okay.
And then commercial is paying 100%.
Correct. And I don't know how many homes over 1 acre. So if the land is valued, you receive the discount up to 1 acre. If the property's over 1 acre, then that over 1 acre is not eligible for the discount as well.
Maybe with commercial, we can just give a percentage. So like if somebody's paying $20,000 right now in property tax, what the...
Were you talking about the notice requirements? We have to put out that they are required to have the commercial aspects in them?
I haven't, no.
Yeah, but we're required by...
So the notice contains that, the average commercial property as well.
Yeah.
So but percentage-wise, what?
So it's the same as residential. So all property tax payers would see a 20% property tax bill increase at the $2 million mark.
Okay. Got it.
So there was one other question. So in the previous meeting, we established a ceiling of $3.3 million. Moving forward with the advertisement at this point, unless staff receives guidance otherwise, the advertisement would target that 3.3 million because that's the ceiling, and the advertisement has to establish the highest rate that you could collect. Now, what I was trying to show here in the presentation is that really 3.3 million is a pretty high property tax rate, and if we received guidance otherwise, we could reduce that notice to 2 million, or we could just leave it at 3.3 million. It's the message that we're sending to the public at that point.
If you reduce it in the notice and you add the 3.3 million as your ceiling established in the prior meeting, do you reduce your ceiling?
Yes.
Okay. This is really helpful data. Do you have another slide after this meatloaf?
I think my next slide might be related to the next agenda item.
Okay.
It is, yep, so that's it.
Okay. So again, while everyone in this valley has been paying property tax, the city of Moab hasn't levied a tax since the 90s. And that is very unusual. We're the only one in the state that doesn't do that. We've relied solely on sales tax to get us through. And in this pandemic, we said, uh-oh, it's a rainy day. Mm-hmm. And so I appreciate you also including, where we would be at with rainy day funds. as well as essential services with infrastructure and officers, so. Ronnie?
Ben, do you feel like for your outreach materials, you kind of know where you want to go? Or if we're talking to residents and they seem to have, just kind of a flurry of questions, is it helpful to you if we let you know what we're hearing in the way of questions? So,
Absolutely.
Okay.
That would be great.
Should we maybe consider funneling residents with questions first to this public open house?
well,
also?
I just think it helps Ben prepare for that open house if he already has kind of a rounded out idea. I mean, a lot of them are common sense. You know what questions you're going to get, but some of them are more nuanced. So I'm just thinking it might help him be even more prepared. Yeah, just because our community has some unique.
Maybe what we could put together is a document where, whether it's council or staff that are hearing questions or concerns about that, we can kind of post to it. Maybe we can have Lisa manage something like that.
Yeah, that'd be great. And I could start that with basically what we're planning to present at this point, and then we could add to it from there.
Because then we could build an FAQ.
Mm-hmm.
So Ben, I would encourage you to, at the public hearing and so forth, and front outreaches, to be sure to paint the picture of what would happen. I mean, because some people aren't going to like any new tax at all. And I think we need to be prepared to describe to them, well, we could, but this is what you're going to give up. This is what we won't have, what you won't enjoy. If you've been complaining about police, there won't be any new ones, blah, blah, blah. I mean, the point, to describe that scenario as well as the more optimistic ones that you're doing, because it might sink in more, is what I'm trying to tell people who are averse to doing it in the first place.
And the last question from me, Ben, is that I've heard different reports. Again, are we the only city who is not instituting a property tax? We're one of three.
Well,
one of four.
It's a show game.
They've implemented a property tax through special service districts.
Yes.
So we're the only ones that are still not levying or collecting money on our behalf.
Those other three cities that don't levy a property tax have a special service district for law enforcement. So they're levying a tax that they're collecting, but it's not technically a property tax. We're the only city that in no way levies that, any form of a tax like that.
Out of 246 cities.
You got it.
Mm-hmm. And if we were to levy a property tax for law enforcement, it would exceed what we're, it would fall right in between the 2 and the 3.3 million. So it would be a significant, if that's how you want to look at it, comparing with the other cities that aren't levying a property tax, then it would be greater than.
Yeah. But those cities can only use that for that specific purpose, correct?
Yep.
And so this gives us a lot more flexibility what we use those dollars for.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
And I mean, the feeling was real when we had a city shut down in March of last year. What would we do? And without having a crystal ball to look into the future as to what is going to happen with the pandemic, this conversation got real.
I want to emphasize the importance of the rainy day fund too, because a lot of times people just think that's, it's a slush fund, it's government surplus, it's unnecessary. When you think about a city the size of Moab with the infrastructure that we have with a rainy day fund under $1 million, that puts you in a scary situation. Any major infrastructure, it takes time to bond for a project. So any major infrastructure problem, you could then have to be going to the state.
Like if we had a well
funds.
blow.
I mean, yeah.
It's scary.
Mm-hmm. I just have another question for you, Ben. I assume, so the priorities that are being presented to use the property tax, they obviously make sense. I have been keeping some of my own notes, and I don't know if other council members have been doing that, like every time this comes up, like what we think we might want to spend it on, just because I was thinking in the back of my head, oh my, regardless of how much we raise, we've already spent it over in our heads 10 times. And so I was just going to mention some of the other things I had in my notes that people had mentioned, because I didn't know if now was the time for anybody to lobby, if they felt really strongly about these things. I mean, I think your list makes sense, but I'm just saying, my notes note that we have also talked about using the property tax for additional staffing, say, in planning, or for sustainability projects, or for paying the annual costs on the shuttle transit project, or for more housing projects. So anyway, I didn't know if anybody else had notes, but just kind of as a wake-up call to all of us about wrapping our heads around what's realistic.
And ultimately, this money, if it's collected, if it's passed by you guys through the budget process, it just goes into the general fund, and as a legislative body, you guys set the budget every year. So you guys, year in and year out, will decide where this money's spent. The staff is just giving you recommendations as far as where we think it could go and where it can be used and where we'd recommend potentially where it could be used. But ultimately, those decisions are all yours.
But I assume the cities, I mean, I don't know, would you say the city's ultimately better off if we kind of have a plan and we try to stick with it? But I mean, I understand there's turnover in council. Somebody could just come in and reject that whole list and, you know, turn it over, and we could spend it all on weed whackers or something. But
it's just like budgeting at your house. If you have a plan, you're always better off with your money.
Yeah,
definitely.
Okay.
For the confidence around this budget and around this heavy lift that we're about to walk into. Were you about to say something?
I was gonna would it never make sense to do it as a special, special service
It's very
tax?
clunky. And the county actually went through a process of like trying to reconsider their special service districts.
There's pros and cons. The pros to a taxpayer is that money is locked in to that service.
Mm-hmm.
The con is, as a body, your money's locked into that service. The other pros and cons are you have a whole nother board now that's setting that rate, collecting that tax, that's controlling. So now this board has to go through that board to set that rate to get that money to go for that service you're providing. So potentially, if this board decides it doesn't want to raise the rate for that special service district, and this board says, no, we need the money for law enforcement, well, technically that special service district has its own board. And if that, you know, depending on how that's set up and who gets on there, there can become conflict of what that rate should be. And what if that board starts deciding that they'd like to have a brand new police station and they want brand new cop cars every year, and they start, because that's their only concern. That board's sole concern is law enforcement at that point. And so they start raising that rate exponentially to try and provide for their service, and you as a body are like, well, hold on, now our citizens are paying this tax rate under just for this one service. So it can get real clunky real fast. Bodies tend to like them because then they're not responsible for raising taxes. You see a lot of governmental entities will use special service districts in a way that they weren't intended to be used, because then that taxing authority gets shifted to another body, and if taxes get raised, that body can say, well, we didn't raise it, the special service district did. So that's something you see a lot of in communities, is they get created to pass the taxing authority and the responsibility for it. So it's cleaner to keep it all in-house and keep it all in one body who's responsible for the collective, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, it just seems like residents would feel like, oh, okay, well, I am paying for police.
Yeah, that's the benefit.
And that's, you know, what we're paying for. We're not paying for, 10 new employees or 10 new cars,
That is the benefit. There are some who pass them and they tie them straight to roads, and they can only be spent on roads. And so there are ways to do that, and people like that aspect of it. But again, if you have something go wrong and your money is all tied into roads or all tied into law enforcement, and you have something go out of the sewer plant, you can always loan yourself money and then go back and repay it. But it just gets a lot more complicated than if it's your money in your account.
And it feels like a really long time ago, but we learned a lot about special service districts with mosquito abatement.
Yep.
And how clunky that was in the conversation with the county about what to do now, whether or not to keep them as a special service district.
Yep. And mosquito
or
abatement,
absorb them back into the county.
Yep, and they've done a great job in the last couple of years, really running their operation.
Yeah. Thank you, Ben, so much. Thanks for this update. Thanks for the meatloaf. Unless there are any other questions for Ben, we'll move on to our next agenda item, and we're now in section 10 for new business, 10.1, fiscal year 2021 fraud risk assessment. You assessed us.
I assessed us, yes. We are in year 3 of the State Auditor's Office Fraud Risk Assessment Program, so we're just required to review this on an annual basis with the legislative body. We only have 3 shortfalls as an entity, which is actually really impressive. So we fall in the low-risk category as defined by the State Auditor's Office. There are 3 areas that we could improve. You do not have a licensed expert on staff. I apologize for that, as I chose to pursue a public administration degree instead of a master's in accountancy. I'm not eligible to be a CPA. But there are a number of other certifications I could pursue if that was a desire of the council. Ronnie had brought this one up, that the fraud hotline, so the State Auditor's Office can actually serve as a fraud hotline for the city. It just has to be implemented into our policies. And so that's one that we'll probably capture in next year. And then the third one is a formal audit committee. I have somewhat strong opinions about that. I hope it didn't come through wrong on the comments, but for an entity the size of Moab that's creating a new body, that doesn't make a lot of sense. So those are the 3 opportunities, and but we have scored ourselves in our self-assessment as low risk for fraud.
Thank you. Unless there are any questions, we can move on to our next agenda item. Okay. And that is 10.2, Proposed Resolution 23, 2021, a resolution amending the fiscal year 2020-2021 budget. Briefing and possible action. So you were going to do a quick explanation. This was what our public hearing earlier was about. We didn't receive any comments. It's an adjustment of last year's fiscal year so that we can close the books.
Yep, the current fiscal year.
And it's worth it to say, last fiscal year, we had a very different fiscal picture than we have in years past because of the pandemic. So thank you for putting together our adjustments.
Yeah, I can touch on those briefly. I've received a number of questions from council members, and I think we've addressed all of those. So, but
does council want Ben to go through?
Yeah,
with the presentation, or do you feel comfortable with the information he provided prior to our meeting?
I kind of like the presentation because it's repetition for me, plus everybody else here hasn't seen it, or out there in YouTube land, only because I found it very helpful to talk to him and ask specific questions, but that may just be me.
I saw some head nods, so go ahead.
Perfect. Okay, so in the adoption of the budget last year, the housing budget, or the housing fund, was omitted unintentionally. So this pulled that budget back in. So what I did was I grouped these into different types. Every line item was grouped into a type of essentially reason for an amendment. So the next one was the CDBG project overflow from fiscal year 2020. So this is the ADA accessibility project on the Center Street Gym. And that just flowed over from a prior year. It was a previous commitment that wasn't anticipated to overflow, but did. Impacts of COVID-19. So here we have the Recreation Fund, a number of revenue funds that were scaled back as a result of those programs not being in place, as well as the CARES Act funding, the $1 million that we received for CARES Act funding.
Was the Recreation Fund the solar at the golf course?
No. This is just program funding for the
just recreation
admissions.
department.
Yes.
Okay, not grant unspent. Okay, sorry.
There was some unbudgeted grant revenue. So these are grants that we received that were not anticipated for the Film Commission and the MARC, the Shared Workspace Project. So those we budgeted both the revenue and the expense. There were a few accounting items. So a number of these were fund contributions from the prior year that didn't take place. So we ended last year with negative fund balances in quite a number of our funds. I think there were 4 or 5 funds that had negative fund balances. That's a problem from an accounting perspective. And so there were quite a few fund transfers to bring those back into the positive or just back to zero. There was the USU set aside. So the USU road that was constructed, the grant money is used last in that situation. So it was a loan grant program. The grant money is used last, and the project didn't use all of the funds. So in February, the those funds were pulled by CIB. And so because that was recognized as a revenue a few years ago, we have to recognize that as an expense now. It's because it's an outflow of funds. Then there were a number of miscellaneous items. And the last one was the general fund contribution. So this is a contribution of rainy day funds, and it's the dollar amount used to balance the budget. So the dollar amount for that was $1.4 million. But what we didn't take into consideration there was all of the reduction in expenses. So after all of the budget cuts, all of the spending freeze, basically after all was said and done at the end of the year, we still haven't wrapped up the year, but our rainy day fund contribution for the last year will be about $100,000. And I think that speaks volumes to staff and all the effort that was made to really pull through, to get together and make the cuts needed to come through as a city. To come through and only have to contribute $100,000 from the rainy day fund in spite of a pandemic is pretty incredible. The number 1.4 million is kind of scary. That's just a formality to keep the budget balanced because we didn't reduce all of those expense categories.
Thank you, Ben.
So with the USU set aside, my memory's a little fuzzy, but I thought that the city and county had contributed cash to that road project. And then CIB was also a portion of it.
That's correct, yeah. So it's just like you said, came from the city, the county, CIB was then, and the balance was 50-50 loan grant. And so basically how that works is you use all of your own contributions first, the city money, the county money, and then the loan money, and then the grant money. Then you touch the grant money.
Oh.
So if there's money left over, they take back their grant money.
Which makes a 50-50 loan grant more like 70-30, you know, so the grant was actually significantly less than anticipated or less than presented back then.
Feels better at the start of the project.
Yeah. And was that in the contract terms or
It
did you
was.
try to, okay, so
Yeah.
you can negotiate about that.
Yeah. And it's kind of one of those things that's maybe a bad incentive as you reach the end of the project. Then, you know, if somebody was paying attention, you might have just gone and done all the pretty parts of the project. You could have done an additional $280,000 worth of improvements that you wouldn't have otherwise been able to do.
And this is a lot of cleanup work. That road up to USU, one of the first things I attended was the ribbon cutting for that. So a lot of this stuff is we're just cleaning up accounting from 4 or 5 years ago in reality. So, I mean, the USU road, I think the ribbon cutting for it was spring of 19. And so, and that negotiation also with CIB for that loan to grant, the CIB is usually not too open to negotiations. So.
Yeah, but maybe in future projects, it would be useful to have additional aesthetic improvements that could get dropped if it ends up over budget.
And my question, because this is a very big concern for me for $286,000. I mean, typically there should be a project director, correct? I mean, did we not have one?
I wasn't here when that was built, so I came on, that thing was completed when I got here.
Because there should be.
Yes, we should be tracking
checks and
that.
balances. I mean, $286, we could do a lot with that, and so.
But
I mean,
wait, is it just that the project saved that money? I mean,
we ended up paying for it.
No, so you gotta look at it like this. If it's a $400,000 project, we give $100,000, the county gives $100,000, and CIB gives $200,000. We have to spend all of ours and the county's money first. And if the project only ends up costing $350,000, then CIB gets their $50,000 back.
Yeah.
So what we're saying is we should have managed the project where that 50 gets spent and it never gets turned back in. You couldn't take that money and use it on a different project, but you could essentially expand the project you're doing.
So just in the future,
We wouldn't have spent that money somewhere else.
No, you could. You could have spent it on that project. You could have gone to CIB and say, we didn't use all the money. Would you like to split the difference? I mean, there was options.
Or maybe we could have designed in fancier bioinfiltration and additional plantings along the perimeter, and then if it we couldn't afford it, that's the sort of stuff you could cut, but if it works out, then that money, sounds like it was grant money, could have been used at no cost and made for a nicer project, if I'm understanding correctly.
Yeah.
So what do we do moving forward to make sure this doesn't happen again?
In the future, we'll add more into our projects, and then we'll actually manage the money as we go along. So,
Like with the downtown parking?
So Ben, the bottom line on it all, is real simple, is that despite all the unexpected expenses and lack of revenue that we might have expected because we cut back expenses during the COVID years, we still came out okay. Is that
I would say we had, I would say that the city was successful in making the necessary cuts.
Yeah. Well, let's hear it for city administration. I mean, once again, we went through this a year ago. Not easy to do.
Mm-hmm. Just two other questions. I think when I came in to meet with you, and I encourage anyone else on the council to go, spend an hour occasionally with Ben, because it was really good to get some questions and just build on one's education in understanding various things. So I think it was $190,000 for sustainability. So just so others know, so that sounds like it was a grant that needed a match, but we couldn't come up with the match, I think, under COVID or whatever, and so hence return of those funds. And then the only other question would be, I think since we're all trying to just build on our knowledge, like everything here that we're amending, is it just kind of considered just regular and standard, or when you look at this as a new finance director, is there anything where we should be making any changes to how we're doing things that maybe we can avoid one or two of these things? I don't know if they're just normal or if...
This was a very abnormal budget amendment.
Yeah.
The last item, those miscellaneous items, those are the housekeeping items that you typically expect in a budget amendment. The things you didn't foresee at the beginning of the year. This list was unusual for a budget amendment.
No, thanks. That just helps us all learn. Cool.
So you won't see them next year is what Ben's telling you.
That's right.
And then there was a question about the 1% for art, and we overspent. We're supposed to give 10,000, and we gave 20,000. Do we know what happened there?
That's every year we're obligated to give 20, and we always budgeted it for 10 since I got here. I don't know why that's the history of what they're doing, but we were trying to adjust that out.
So we're supposed to do 20,000 a year?
It's historically what we've done.
I've always seen 10 since I've been on council.
That's what I'm telling you. The budget that's come before you historically has always been 10, and they've always adjusted it at the end of the year to 20. That's exactly what I'm telling you.
And then the only other question I have is the administrative budget. It looks like there was it 60,000 for, is it for our lobbyist?
Yep, 20 for the prior, 40 for prior.
So we pay our lobbyist 40,000 a year, is that correct?
Paid him 20. I can't remember if it was 20 the first year and 40 the following year, if it was 40 up front and then 20 into this year. But it was a $40,000 payment for 1 year and 20,000 for half. I can't remember which order they came in. But yes. And that equated to the $1.7 million in CARES funding from the $400,000 we originally got. So I think it was very well spent.
But, I mean, like the last ULTC meeting, I mean, they have specific ULC team members who are working towards, I mean, even the ARPA funding is going to be.
That's going to be $750. That we just received that invoice. That's $750. It's very different.
Yeah.
For non-entity, we're going to be also receiving money from ARPA. So that ULCT is, I mean, they were doing as much work as the lobbyists to try to get cities, they're under, 50,000 population. I'm just saying that they were doing work as well. It wasn't just our lobbyist.
Yep, and the league was working for us as well when we got our CARES funding, and our CARES funding was basically the low 6 figures, and once we got our lobbyists and got them involved, we got that bumped up to the 1.2, I think was the final number. So I think it was very beneficial to us this last year. I think it paid huge dividends during COVID, but.
Yeah, and it seems like he helped, or they helped advance the UTV issue, even if it didn't have the specific outcome.
Yeah.
It really raised its prominence in the legislature and advanced the dialogue at the state level.
It definitely advanced that dialogue, and it took that dialogue from, we weren't going to get that bill to begin with, to you guys go and actually try and do your noise ordinances and do some things, and we'll step back and let you try and run what you want to do. I think without that dialogue and without that bill being pushed at the Hill last year in the legislative session, if we'd have tried to just do the noise ordinance and come at that with no backing, I think they would have not allowed us to do what they've allowed us to do. I think the fact our lobbyists were there and we were able to push so hard in that session, the legislatures agreed to allow us to try and do what we've been trying to do for the last 6 months. I think it paid a huge dividend in that as well. So.
Thanks.
Thanks, Ben. If there are not any other questions for Ben, I would entertain a motion.
I move to approve Resolution 23-2021, amending the fiscal year 2020-2021 budget.
I'll second.
Thank you, Kaylin. Thank you, Tani. Discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion passes 5-0. Thanks, Ben. We're now at agenda item 10-3. Don't go too far. Unless, is this just you, Carly? Not Ben. Okay. Award of the fiscal year 2021 audit contract.
I mean, it can be Ben. Ben prepared the agenda items. I don't want anyone to think it was me. I don't want to take credit for his good work. It's best practice to change auditors every year, right? So the city issued an RFP to select a new firm. We received 4 proposals, and staff's recommendation is that Gilbert and Stewart is most responsive at the most competitive price.
Council, any questions?
Oh, I was just going to let people know that I forgot to report that we got our audit report at the EMS district today, and it was from Gilbert and Stewart. So that was my first experience with them. It was good.
Good.
They're fanning out down here.
Any other questions? I would entertain a motion.
Go
ahead.
I'm sorry. I move to award the financial audit services contract to Gilbert and Stewart for fiscal year 2020-2021, not to exceed a maximum of 5 years.
Thank you, Karen.
I'll second.
Thank you, Tani. Discussion? Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion passes 5-0. Thanks, Carly. Welcome, Nora. Agenda item 10-4, proposed resolution 24-2021, a resolution approving the townhome plat application for the Thompson Townhomes property located at 246 East, 200 South. This is a briefing and possible action.
I can address some of the issues. Mayor, I don't know if you want to poll the council and find out if they want.
I would, actually. So, council, if you have any unanswered questions about this, we could certainly entertain them. Also, if you want Nora to pull up the plat, she can certainly do so. This is an administrative action of the council, not a legislative one, but per our code, it is required. So, questions for Nora? Do you want her to pull up the plat?
I have a question. It doesn't require the plat.
Okay.
So it seems like with my understanding from the plat is that there will be a significant portion of the property will be under shared ownership. And so like with PUDs and condo associations, there is some entity whereby there's governance and an agreement about how maintenance and costs thereof for that property are taken care of. Because this, and it seems like the state legislature and local governments don't want it to go well, so because otherwise they tend to come to other governments for help. And so with a townhome plat, at what point, if at all, does Moab review or approve those agreements, or is it just kind of up to the developer and the buyers to, and the local government isn't involved?
Before we sign the plat, we will review the CCNRs to make sure that, one, the common spaces, everybody owns an undivided interest in the common space, so there's not a separate parcel, which was a change in state law that happened, but, and then also that they have mechanisms in place. But we have received our CCNRs, and that's the intent, yes. And in terms of the platting, really, state law only recognizes two types of platting. One is a subdivision, the other is condominium. And you can call, a townhome can be either. So townhome is really more of a term of row house. And you can record it in a couple different ways. So the last one we looked at, which was the Ben Bird's, that was, he actually drew property lines and, you know, where the units fell and went to the front property line to the back property line. So not only do they own the unit, they own the land in front and behind. This one, that you would own the land underneath your unit, but anything in front or in back is common area. So it's more of a condo plat. And the reason I think most people do townhome plats if they can, because it's easier to finance. But with this particular one, sometimes they don't include the land underneath the condo. It's just sort of wall to wall. And it seems that financial institutions are now looking more favorable on condo plats that include the land underneath the unit itself, which is what this one is.
Any other questions? What's Mill Creek Pueblo?
Sorry?
Pueblos. Mill Creek Pueblos.
It's condos.
Condos.
Yeah. I live there. I happen to know that. And we have a homeowner association that charges a lot of money.
And a pool.
So these units, I've been watching them build these things. It's common walls in between units, is that right?
Sometimes.
Well,
But our unit is a good example. We replaced one of our windows, and that was a homeowner association responsibility. Because it was inside the paint.
Well, that would make it easier. I mean, I'm just trying to imagine if I was a bank lending somebody, I mean, the wall if somebody says, well, the wall leaks in my place, but who's the wall belong to? Well, it belongs to you. I mean, if there's a dividing line right down the middle, it's a mess. I don't know. Whatever.
Don't buy one if you don't like it. Anything else? Thanks, Nora. I would entertain a motion.
I move that City Council approve Resolution 24-2021, a resolution approving the townhome plat application for the Thompson Townhomes, property located at 246 East 200 South, Moab.
Thank you, Mike. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Kaylin. Discussion? Seeing none, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor, say aye.
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 Motion passes 5-0. Oh, what's this?
Hot off the press.
Thank you, Nora.
Hot, hot, hot. Proposed ordinance, next agenda item, 10-5. Proposed ordinance 2021-13, an ordinance amending the text of the Moab Municipal Code to add regulation for outdoor dining.
Mayor, I am going to excuse myself because I have a conflict.
Excuse or recuse?
Excuse and recuse.
Thanks, Tani. For accusing yourself for fiscal conflict. Nora, real quick, you're handing us this, as this is an amended resolution. You want to go through the amendments real quick in case anybody's interested in how it was amended?
Sure. I sent this to you all earlier today.
And I'm happy, Summer, if you want to take this and just distribute if somebody wants to look at this as well.
I gave a copy too. Oh, gosh.
The table's wobbling. Okay, sorry.
2021-13, I'm trying to find the graph.
Some of it is just basic, just edits, but
Yeah, so.
one is, if a property is located on a corner, only one parklet is allowed per restaurant. The parklet will be located on the street with lower volumes of traffic and where the parklet will least disrupt the entrances to other businesses. That was the amendment. That was the substantive amendment.
Yeah, so that change.
Don't worry about it if you can't pull it up.
That change, I can, I just have to dig a little farther. That change was included in the Planning Commission's recommendation. So it was, based upon public comments, we made that modification. Since the Planning Commission meeting and since the packet went out, we've received one additional comment that I forwarded it to you from the folks at 98 Center, just for your information.
And that would be an amendment to what is J?
Yeah.
The April 15th to October 31st. And what was the suggested new
November 31st, wasn't it?
dates?
Yeah, I think this is the
It was
right one.
extending the period.
Okay, 7 to 10. All right, I need to get at my document here. I'm sorry.
No worries.
While she's doing that, can I make a motion? Or is we can't do that?
You certainly could.
I just wanted to honor the potential extension of request dates.
Yeah. So, a couple things.
Does your motion include that? I would entertain a motion, if that's
Nora.
what you want to do.
No problem. I mean, you could.
I just was going to have her say the dates first,
Okay.
just to make sure we're on the same date page.
Okay. So, right now, we don't allow outdoor dining at all in our code. It used to be a conditional use, and when we did away with that, we did away with all references. So this puts back in some regulations and allows outdoor dining both on a year-round basis and seasonal dining. The other thing it does is this addresses parklets. And we have been allowing parklets. Okay. We have been allowing parklets under COVID, but the direction to the staff was that we wanted to make it a land use change so that it lived longer than COVID. And the deadline for that was June 31st. So, which if you approve it today, then we meet that deadline. So the changes that I have made most recently include a new E, which talks about the applicant will work with the city engineer and the public works director if they desire to build a more substantial parklet. Any parklet improvements will be allowed seasonally, requiring removal during the off-season. The reason I put that in was because there was a request that they be able to do like decking, much like is done in Park City, and there was a photograph that was included in the public comment on that. And that they would have to work with Levi and Chuck and also Barry, the building official, to make sure that we deal with all the potential storm drain issues, access to our storm sewers, and access to everything that we need. So they would design the deck to provide that. In addition, having it more permanent would allow them to put up a more permanent sort of superstructure where they could actually hide the lights so that they would be fully cut off and would not be like the little fake lights that hang, that have the little covers on them. Those don't really comply with our current lighting ordinance. So he could design it so that the lighting would actually be truly dark sky compliant. So I added that, and then the change in the dates. We originally had April 15th through October 31st. The request is for March 1st through November 30th. And then the language about the parklet, which is something that the Planning Commission actually recommended.
So what you passed out has the old dates. So that, it has the April to October. That's why I was.
Yeah, that's what's weird. Anyway,
and
it's what you got today, I think.
All right,
It's what I
so
just pulled up.
whatever
so-
the motion is, let's be really clear.
Okay. I can read the language. to
Which
you.
version, yeah, and what, yes.
Before one of us makes a motion, can we have a little more discussion, only because it might impact the motion? It's easier to get everything in one motion
Definitely.
than changing it a few times.
Yep, go for it.
So Nora, I know you were going to produce a map that showed the zones overlaying the restaurants.
That did not get done, and I apologize for that.
Okay.
It's a different format from our zoning map, so it's more than just a quickie.
Okay, yeah, so I don't know if the rest of you noticed, like on the original map, and I don't know, maybe staff can explain to me, I'm sure there's a reason this happens, and it might be time lapse and overlap, but there were several restaurants not on the map, and there's at least Melt, and I'm not sure about Wild Bloom fermentations in the C5, and so I wanted to ask about the C5, but I'd asked for a zone overlay map because it helps me visualize where we could potentially, see this ordinance being active. And so just so you guys know, like places like, as far as I could tell anyway, the brewery and the bistro and the diner, and others are not on there, but also part of my concern was, has anyone kind of looked at the map and kind of thought about restaurants and where we have existing ones? And so I just noticed, I was just thinking about those two in the C5, and granted, I don't know if Wild Bloom has seating, but, and I saw, thanks Nora for answering my question about, there were some food trucks on there, but I understand the food trucks are not considered restaurants, so I'm guessing.
That's right.
So if a food truck decides it wants to have seating, does this ordinance apply to their outdoor seating? Or
No.
the food truck is in no way part of any of this?
It's not, it's a business license function only. It's not part of our zoning code. It's a business license, is the way it's regulated.
And is that because of the state? Like, I mean,
Yes.
what's nice about the ordinance in here is we have certain things like, okay, you can't have, there's certain noise things and stuff, which I know have been a conflict sometimes with the food trucks, but I'm guessing we can't have those same stipulations for food trucks.
They need to be in a different place.
Uh-huh.
And we have been discussing, since the day I got here, revising our food truck ordinance. We are restricted by the state as to what we can, restrict, but in general, we pretty much have to allow them. And we can require that they do parking and that they have to get approval from the health department, the fire department, and the building official.
Okay.
But it's not really a land use issue, it's more of a business licensing issue, which doesn't make sense, but that's the way state code sort of sets it.
Okay, so
forward.
things like amplified noise or something we don't allow in this ordinance, but they couldn't be made to apply, say, to a food truck.
It could be if
Yep.
we modify the business license ordinance to have, it would probably be a separate section, and it could be in the land use code that specifically addresses food trucks.
I mean, I don't know if anyone else is interested, but to me, I guess as a resident, and because some of these places, regardless of these zones in the ordinance or places we have food trucks, I mean, they can be right next to a residential area, and it's kind of nice if they're consistent. Otherwise, it becomes really confusing as a resident of like, okay, well, why are they doing it this way and they're doing it this way? So, I mean, I could go, after this and read through what seems to be different for food trucks, but I guess personally, it would be nice if we could go and make them adhere to some of the same things.
And I agree with
the
you.
landscaping and buffering and the noise and the,
Right.
yeah.
And that's why we really, it takes a kind of a different big effort to do that, to figure out, and I just haven't Mona's actually kind of working on that and trying to figure out what other places have done and what we can regulate and what we can't. Because there's quite a bit of stuff we can't.
So let's tease a couple of things apart. So food trucks are in a category that are different.
Right.
So we're going to, that's
not
not
really
what we're
restaurants.
kind of working on here.
Right.
But let's just address the and clarify like the C5
And there might be other zones.
Milts, and if Dave's Corner Market wants to start cafeing in their parking lot.
Okay.
What can you clarify that?
Yeah, let me clarify a couple things. Ronnie referred to the map, and we did that map based upon our current business license list as of a couple of months ago, when I prepared the first staff report for the Planning Commission. So if a restaurant's not on there, it means they don't have a business license, or they're under a DBA. I think Desert Bistro, for example, is listed as something else because that's the name of their corporation. And they got it through that corporation rather than through, it's not called, the corporation's not called Desert Bistro, it's called something else. So I think there are a few that don't have current business licenses. And this is the time of year when those are renewed. So now that we have a kind of an inventory, and I appreciate Ronnie's additions to that. I also got a citizen who came in and told me about all the ones that aren't on there. So that's helpful.
Was it meant to be an exhaustive list?
No, it was really just meant to be an example that shows that parklets can't go in too many places because a lot of our restaurants are on Main Street. In other places in town, they exist on larger lots so that they can have outdoor seating. And if they can't have outdoor seating on site, then we don't allow, then we wouldn't allow a parklet.
And so is Milts, the exception for Milts is that their outdoor dining area is not part of their parking lot?
Well, I did not add the changes to the C5 just because I wasn't sure if outdoor dining was compatible since it's a neighborhood commercial zone. Milts is there, it's been there for a long time. People hanging out in front of Dave's Market or Moonflower, those aren't restaurants, that's just gathering area.
But if Dave's Corner Market wanted to do a cafe and sling sandwiches.
But he has area on his lot that he could do it.
Right, so that's what I'm asking.
So he would not be able to do a parklet.
Well, the parklets are only C3 anyway.
Yeah, parklets are really pretty much only
It's
the
kind of a question of on-site, temporary or permanent, outdoor seating.
But were you asking about to allow outdoor dining? So then would that disallow outdoor dining if C5 isn't included in this section?
Right.
3, 4.
I'd be inclined to include outdoor dining in C5 and I1. I1 allows restaurants as well.
And what?
I1.
Oh, the industrial.
Industrial.
I would second that.
You can do that.
Well, okay, so instead of that, it should just be built into the motion. And so what I'm seeing is a list of amendments to what was in our packet and then what was emailed to us and then even different than what was handed to us here.
Sorry.
So let's just make our list right now of a motion, the list of amendments, yeah?
So if I read your email ordinance and recommended that and just adding C5 and I1, would that suffice?
Yeah, but I can go through them if you're interested in that.
I'm going to have some more, which I can add on to a motion after it's made, or we can discuss them before.
No one's moving anything until we get our comprehensive list of adjustments that we would make to the recommended ordinance.
So
I just want to make sure, because otherwise Laurie's going to get mad at us, that we have at least the original document that we're referencing in the motion with the additions that are made. So we can use one that was emailed to us, but I think it might be better, cleaner in a motion if we reference the ordinance that was in our packet and then the amendments to that ordinance. Does that make sense?
But, so if we do the one in the packet, do we have to say with the addition of item E, K, and L?
I can do that, yeah.
Okay.
And I can go through those real quickly if you want me to.
Maybe we can start scribbling that list while Kaylin gives us another bucket.
Okay, but Ronnie, did you have anything else? Okay, so I'd request that where lighting references are, that substituting outdoor for dark sky, because our code, even though we talked a lot about dark sky during the adoption process, the code actually is the outdoor lighting section. Because while dark skies are a benefit of well-designed lighting, there are many other benefits as well. So I think it'll be cleaner for the code reference.
Yeah, the reason I put dark skies in is just so that people had background about why we care.
Okay.
But I understand completely, so that's absolutely fine.
So can you just state what that would be? Amending, is that F?
What I wrote was substitute outdoor for dark sky on all lighting references. Because there's multiple references to dark sky.
Okay, that's pretty clear. That's
Okay.
clear. Yep.
Yeah.
Okay.
So one thing that I noticed is that there, in each code section at the bottom is a section called Special Provisions. And it talks about parking surfaces shall be hard, noise, odor, and glare shall not cross property boundaries, outside storage of equipment, materials, and supplies shall be contained. And yet these are all included in the requirements for outdoor dining. So it seems duplicative to include them when they're already in the code, in each code section, in each zone section. And so, for example, in the permanent outdoor dining provisions, D, parking surfaces shall be hard. That's already addressed in the each zone section, as is E, noise, odor, and glare. H, outside storage of equipment, materials, and supplies, and then K talks about DABC requirements, and relatively recently we expunged all DABC licensing requirements from our code because it's outside our jurisdiction. So, and now it's being brought back in, and I'm not sure why. So I feel like all those things could be removed from the outdoor dining without actually losing them, because if you're reading the whole zone section, a bunch of those requirements are already there.
What's the history of the document
So
draft?
on the DABC stuff,
Yeah.
basically we had that with the parklets to make people understand that it's their responsibility, not ours.
Yeah, so this isn't, what we got rid of was licensing requirements with the city. What this is saying you're changing the footprint of your business, which is changing your DABC application.
And it's your problem.
It's your problem to go get the DABC to fix all that. We have nothing to do with that. So this isn't, what we removed was licensing requirements. This is more of just a notice of, we hand the rule to the applicant and it says, you're changing your footprint. This could violate and get rid of your alcohol license with the state. You need to go address with the state whether or not this does that before, and if you do it, it's not on us, that we do forfeit.
Right, so it's...
So you're saying, so Joel,
More
I'm
of a
hearing
notice.
the question was, is it duplicative? And you're saying it's not duplicative.
That's what I'm saying.
Okay.
Nora, do you agree with that?
I agree completely. That was the intent when I wrote it.
Okay, so I withdraw my statements about the DABC references, but I still think the other ones are...
Okay.
Agreed.
Okay. And then for temporary, it says outdoor dining must not encroach into the zone required setbacks. And my reading of code is that that'll mainly be well, I'm not sure about C5, but for C4, there's a 25-foot required setback. And so it seems like what businesses will largely use that for is like landscaping or parking. Mm-hmm. And I'm not sure why allowing temporary, like having temporary dining in the front of the building in the setback would be worse than having parking if they're figuring out how to allocate space. In some ways, it seems like it'd be better because it would present a more attractive street front.
Well, it's technically, a lot of these are structures because they have decking and they have.
Right. Well,
often
I'm
have
specifically
covers.
talking about temporary.
Right, but even seasonal ones
Oh,
often do. They have coverings for sure
Yeah.
because of the sun and the heat. So I was just equating them to a shed or, it's a structure. And since it's a structure where people will be all the time, then it makes sense to me to make them meet the zone required setbacks. Now, if you want to make a modification to that, we certainly can.
okay. I'll leave it alone.
And the front is probably a good one to do. The sides and the rear are pretty minimal anyway. They're 12 and 15.
Oh, yeah, I mean,
8 and 15, wait a minute, I'd have to go back and.
okay,
and
no,
dig up the code.
never mind on that. And then it seems like in the parklets, there's this whole list of basically requirement or criteria. And then there's section L is other design criteria, which kind of repeats some of what was said in the previous lettered criteria, which was just confusing to me. I just wasn't sure that this was like all fully cleaned up. Like, for example.
What are the letters again?
Well, like A through K are basically design criteria.
Right.
But then there's item L is other design criteria, and then there's this numbered list of design criteria. And so, like,
They could be.
width is addressed in both C and 2. And in fact, C includes a statement that says that there's a way to have exceptions, but 2 doesn't say you can have exceptions. And then other design criteria 3 talks about the minimum remaining lane width, and B talks about maintaining a 15-foot fire lane. 3 says it can be reduced on a case-by-case basis. B says it must be maintained at all times. So it seems like the same criteria are being talked about in different places, but how exceptions are treated differently. So I just feel like this needs to be cleaned up.
Okay, that's only for parklets.
I know this is just for parklets,
okay.
but I just feel like the criteria section for parklets
Could be in one piece rather than 2.
could be in one piece rather than. I feel like there's duplication and inconsistencies in this, and I'm not prepared to make a motion addressing them all.
Okay. Let me talk about what to do if you don't pass this tonight.
Okay.
So we talked about this because I figured there would be modifications. So if this doesn't pass tonight, then as of June 30th, technically the COVID parklets go away.
Operators operating a parklet would receive a 30-day notice of compliance.
Right, so I was going to say. So we would put the existing parklet on notice. We would write Alex a letter is on June 30th, 98 Center, and say that the regulations have expired, new ones are pending, but in the meantime, the regulations have expired, and you have 30 days to correct the situation. And hopefully within that 30 days, we'll get it passed.
Well, they wouldn't even expire till the 30th, so it'd take us to like the 1st or 2nd to get the letter.
Yeah.
And then it's a
But then you'll
holiday,
get the
so
letter
we
out.
get it till the
Mayor, I have
30th.
a question. Would we, since we're meeting on Thursday, could we get a clean copy and actually vote on this on Thursday?
On next week, Thursday, when we meet for a special meeting?
Yes, if we were to table this and get a clean.
Nora, do you feel like you've got all of the corrections? And are there any other changes that might be made to this document? And maybe you could just have a moment with Nora after this.
I just have one more
Okay.
question.
Let me just figure,
Okay.
go ahead.
Well, then let's do that, and
Oh.
I would entertain a motion to table until our special meeting.
Or I'm happy to take it up with Nora later.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think so.
Yeah, you can either talk to me or email me or whatever.
Especially if it's kind of like just wording specific.
So I move to table this ordinance until Wednesday, June 30th.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Should I get Tony?
Mike, was that an aye?
Yeah.
Okay, motion passes 4-0,
Yeah,
and it is tabled.
okay, great.
Thank you. Let's get these documents back to you since they're, I don't want anybody to put them in their
but there's
pocket. 'Cause they
too
don't
many
have them.
drafts, that's the problem.
Thanks.
Here's one more, Jill. Thank you.
Okay.
Thanks.
Let me just reshuffle what's happening here. Okay, and we are now at, where are we? We are at agenda item 10-6, matching grant request from Utah State University for a visitor use study, briefing and possible action. And Wayne, we have actually Wayne Friedman from Utah State University that's here. If you want to come on up, we're at your agenda item. And to give us a presentation of sorts. Did you want to plug in?
No.
Are you sure?
Yeah, I didn't
Okay.
prepare.
Oh, okay, okay. But welcome, Wayne, and thank you, Carly, for prepping the agenda item. Yeah, take it away.
All right, well, thank you all. Thanks for staying up so late to discuss this. My name is Wayne
This
Fryman.
is early.
This is early. You all have stamina. So my name is Wayne Fryman. I'm a professor at Utah State University. I arrived here April 1st, 2020 to a town that was empty, like a school with no students or a camp with no kids. And spent a year here basically in COVID lockdown, working through Zoom at the university. And was fortunate to be able to get to know quite a few of the, at least land managers in the community and start to talk to them about what we could be doing at Utah State that would help them. And recreation is a big deal here. I knew that coming. I have been working in and out of Moab since about 91. I came here from Clemson, South Carolina, so if you're ever wondering if there is a place that's so hot that people would come to Moab right now, there is. It's Clemson, South Carolina.
Go Tigers.
You go Tigers. I was there for 3 years as the department chair for the Parks, Recreation, and Tourism Management Department. Before that, I was at the University of Montana for 23 years, where I was interim dean of the College of Forestry and Conservation, department chair of Society and Conservation a couple of times, and a faculty member. My research is all about visitor management in national parks primarily, but also other large kind of wildlife refuges and places both in the U.S. and abroad. So I got the chance to escape the heat and come to Moab, and I'm very happy to be here, and thanks for listening. So
Hold on, one more thing before you get into the proposal. Can you speak about the work that you did with Yellowstone and the snowmobiles?
Yeah, so at the University of Montana, I started there in 1993, and I went down to the park to talk to the managers, find out if they had projects for students, internships, that sort of thing. They found out that I had been doing research, actually, that started at Delicate Arch, that helped kind of quantify people's norms relative to crowding. And it turned into a dissertation defense by the time I got out of that discussion. And they knew that winter use was starting to really get out of control, in their opinion, escalating. There were cumulative impacts that they could sense but couldn't document. And so we started in on a line of research. I worked with that project for 15 years, from the very beginning of them wondering what to do with snowmobile capital of the world, which is what West Yellowstone was promoting itself as, to 7 plans, 7 lawsuits, tens and tens of millions of dollars later. In 15 years, they finally came to a resolution that ended up managing snowmobiles in the winter, so you had to have 4-stroke motors to deal with sound issues and with hydrocarbon issues. You had to go in a guided group to keep people from harassing wildlife, and the group sizes were limited, and everybody was permitted to get in. And the outfitters in the area worked with the park to develop that kind of permit allocation system. And there was just enough of a kind of flexibility in that final plan so that there was potential for growth if things went well, but also potential for things to get ratcheted down further if they didn't go well. And it really, after 15 years, it finally was appealed. And I had the honor, really, in a way, to facilitate their final meeting with all of the different stakeholders. Everybody from the Yellowstone Coalition to the Blue Ribbon Coalition was there to figure out how they were going to monitor things going forward. So it was much more of a community-engaged plan. And they kind of figured it out. It was the first time they'd been in a room together without lawyers for 15 years. So, sorry, no offense.
No offense, actually. 3 training.
I've mentioned to several people that the rhetoric that I see in Moab revolving around OHVs and side-by-sides and everything is almost identical to the rhetoric that was surrounding snowmobile access to Yellowstone in the mid-90s. It's deja vu. It's almost spooky how similar it is, and how emotional it is. And so I'm glad you got some kind of clarity on policy, that what you're doing, but if that experience was any reflection on the reality here, you're not done with OHV stuff. I mean, it's going to continue to evolve and morph and create demands until there's some kind of collaborative way to manage it. That's just off to the side. So the way I approach research for recreation or visitor use is to try to nestle it with social ecological system thinking. And that means you need to look at the interactions between the environment and the people, and between the people, and to do it at different scales. And so when I got to Moab and started meeting with people in the agencies, I had a nice meeting with the mayor early on, and I think you stimulated one of the primary questions, like how do we know how many people actually come to Moab? And we have all these different data sources.
Well, it's a 2-part question. How many people are coming to Moab, and what are they doing?
And what are they doing when they get here? Yeah. And how many times are we double counting them? You know, how many times does somebody get counted when they go to Arches, and then they get counted again when they go on the river, and then they get counted again at Sand Flats, and then they get counted again on an OHV ride or a Jeep safari? And it's all one person. So so with that little piece of curiosity, I started asking the folks at the parks, and how are you estimating your use, your demand? How do we know what the kind of dynamics are between where people are and where they're going? For example, when Arches becomes an origin at 9 a.m. when they close it rather than a destination, where do those people go? Do they just go to Canyonlands? Do they come back into Moab? Do they decide to go mountain biking? How do they adapt when their plan gets abruptly changed like that? If what they do is just move further and further out into the backcountry, that's just adding, it might be, dealing with the congestion problem at Arches, but it's just going to add problem somewhere else. It's kind of a hydra sort of thing that happens. And they may be moving to places that are less capable of absorbing the impact than arches. Not to say that we need more people in arches, but those kind of system effects are seldom understood or looked at in kind of recreation research. So I talked to everybody about how they were getting their data, making their assumptions, and concluded that I still didn't know how many people came to Moab or why, and what they were doing. If you talk to the river folks, it's all about the river. If you talk to the climbers, it's all about climbing. You talk to the bikers, it's, you know, so the people are kind of working in their silos here in town. And of course, many are doing more than one silo. So I kind of went back to it and started to think, well, what kind of a study should we do, you know, before I start a research program here, or before we start trying to develop a bunch of work for graduate students or undergrads that are going to try to help us understand what's going on. I wanted to know what is the existing condition? What is a good description of what's happening here now at a scale that transcends the different ownership types? So in a simple way, and then again, I'm new here, and so I didn't want my first meeting with anybody to be, hi, my name is Wayne, I'm new in town, do you have any money? I'd like to do a study. So I started with the university itself and went back to them and said, you know, I really think we need a way to get some data that helps us see from a different altitude what's happening here. But you know, we're in a pandemic where everybody's in a crisis. It's not a good time to run around with my hat in my hand. So the university actually came through with a subscription to Streetlight Insight Data for a year, which is a mobile device data company, and which gave me enough to get started to figure out if that kind of data was going to be accurate enough to help us in this context, which is a little bit different than the way transportation data is designed. Most of those kind of mobile device things, they come out of transportation planning shops. They work really great where you have a lot of people, and maybe not so great, you know, out on the Gemini, Arch kind of area. So we've been playing around with it, trying to figure out how good it is, and have concluded it can do a lot for us. And so with a little bit of excitement about that, it can do a lot for us, but it needs to be calibrated. So I talked to people at the state tourism office. It's like, well, we should scale this up a little bit. I don't have enough data to do much. I've got some startup money and a grad student I can help put into doing this, but you know, I'm afraid we're going to overpromise and underdeliver. So through the State Office of Tourism, I ended up meeting Elaine Gisler. She got excited about it, and then also pledged to pitch in another subscription of data, so that now we had enough that we could actually start looking at some dynamics here. So that was kind of where things were, and I circled back, talked to Mayor Niehaus about this is some of what we think we could do. About that time, she thought maybe the city would be interested in helping ramp it up a little bit. And also at that time was an RFP out for the Public Land Initiative to be able to try to get some matching support. So we put a proposal together to the Public Land Initiative, which was ultimately funded, which really kind of looks at the donut around town. It's the kind of the public lands that are surrounding Moab. And what I'm asking for in this proposal from you all is to give us some more staffing and time to basically drill into town better and have more time, you know, more time, more detail in the data at that point. So that's where we are. It's been a kind of a weird evolution of conversations that ended up that were fairly abstract up until all of a sudden the PLI grant actually came through. And then that stimulated, oh, okay, now we got enough that we can do something. The document that you have is a proposal that lays out kind of the bigger objectives of what we want to do. It does not go into a detailed study, plan design, or any of that, which did not make sense to do until we knew how big this thing would be and until we know who the partners really are in it, because we want it to be a very collaborative thing. So hopefully it sounds like I'm coming asking for a partnership and for you to join something that we've already established a lot of momentum for, rather than our first meeting being, hi, my name is Wayne and I'm here looking for some money. I think with that, just questions that you have.
Well, let me start us off with, so of the 4 objectives that are in the study, like how amendable are they? Like how could, because as you saw, we were looking at an ordinance about parklets, and this council had really good questions and wanted to, dig into editing and having input. So how open are you to that?
I think some of them are pretty necessary, to meet the needs of everybody around here. So the total volume stuff, I think we need to try to figure that out.
Wayne, would you do me a favor? Just
I'm
speak
sorry.
up a little bit more.
Oh, sorry.
Thank you. For everybody else.
Yeah, I think the understanding total volume, where people are, when they're there, who they are, where they're from, that sort of stuff, I think
critical.
It's pretty foundational to the rest of it. I think that the observation things that we need to do and the surveys that we want to do are also fairly foundational to help make sense of all of that kind of big data stuff. The 4th objective, the one that I put in about understanding OHV movements in town, that one I think was really targeting kind of the debate about OHV patterns and use here in town. And that was a reflection of a bunch of different conversations. That's not as critical, I don't think. Then there's a good bit of flexibility within what we ask. We have some conceptual things that we want to get at. We want to understand their motivations, where they're from, what they're doing, why they're doing it. We want to understand their sense of quality of their experience, and we want to understand the potential conflict they see with other kinds of uses. But there's quite a bit of room to, adapt. And my style is to work with the partners. I've always felt that the research that I've done, where whoever the practitioner is and whoever the scientist is, if you build the questions together, you have a much better chance of coming up with an answer that's going to be useful. So, again, it's a sketch of big objectives.
Okay.
Is there any negotiation in the price?
On price?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, of course. That's like.
It just seems like it's a big ask for the city for data that's not necessarily data that, item number 4, it seems like that's the most pertinent to the city. And like having a partnership with Arches or BLM, it would be nice to share that 36,000.
The way that this particular budget was structured, what I basically put into it was human resources. In the last conversation I had with the mayor, he said, I have data, I need people to kind of work on it. The PLI grant doesn't allow, it allows for grad students and it allows for, like data collectors, but it doesn't allow for any other kind of funding for supervising staff or faculty. So, yeah, as long as the objectives are commensurate with the commitment, then, yeah, there's room to change it. I mean,
Are you
So-
also saying, could we further cost share with other agencies? Like, would you be willing to, like, approach other agencies as well to spread out the expense?
Yes.
Right?
So maybe I could jump in. So I reviewed the TRT code and talked to a county commissioner, and I think there might be the ability and support to pay for this out of the restricted TRT via the county. So I don't have an answer to that, but I think it might be worth delaying because I think we might have that. And just reading the objectives, it does seem like it does have more to do with the county jurisdiction than the city, even though this sounds like great work and I'm supportive and I want to see it happen, but I think that these are impacts generated by tourism, and I think the tourism money may be able to pay for helping to come to terms with it. Not sure about that, but I think it's worth pausing this particular item.
So I got a question for you, Wayne. So regardless of where the county might get their money, I'm surprised with the county. Have you already approached them about being a funding partner?
No, I haven't. Other than travel.
Yeah, because I agree entirely with Kalen. Much of this is on county land, not necessarily city. And if I may, Mayor, one other burning question I got for you is, suppose you do this study, and my question is, then what? What's going to change, and who's going to change it? I mean, it strikes me as, frankly, is that much of what you want to know here is already known, and you're sure to discover some nuances, there's no question about that. But particularly when the Public Lands Initiative gets in the act, all right, I know I was around when Rob Bishop and was here and all that, maybe they've changed their colors since then, for all I know. But I'm curious, frankly, what's in it for the city? I mean, if something really positive came out of it, the best thing I can think of that would happen is you could convince the state legislature to carve out an exclusion zone for OHVs from requiring them here in town. I mean, that'd be the greatest thing ever if we could just say, hey, but I'm not holding my breath about that one. But I do want to know what you might visualize. I mean, you must have some idea where the study might take you afterwards.
Yeah, I think there's some very practical things, and then there's some academic things that I'd love to see come out of it. But practically, I think with these kinds of studies, the most revelatory thing is that our assumptions are often wrong about what we know. And again, I'm new, so I would defer to you all that you might have all this kind of data, figured out already. I haven't found it. So I did a study like this at Glacier National Park. They thought they were getting 30,000 people a year on a trail. They thought that trail was already a high-use, kind of quasi-wilderness kind of experience, and we're having questions about whether or not it was too many people for wilderness. So we went out and we actually looked at what it was, and there were 90,000 people on the trail a year. So they had a bit of a kind of a boiling frog thing that was going on. Even though they're there working, watching it every day, they weren't really seeing the changes that were happening. That knowledge led to a sequence of events, but actually developing a corridor management plan that was going to try to figure out how do we make sure not every trail ends up with 90,000 people on it in this area. Another study like this that I worked on, once they found out that demand was higher than they thought it was, the county used it for a grant proposal and was able to get a lot of money to help extend out their infrastructure. So I think having good numbers is a good thing. On a more kind of conceptual level, you see so much debate in this town that is happening through kind of emotional appeals, which are extremely important, but how grounded they are in a common set of facts is a little mystifying sometimes. So it would be nice to have, I think, at least one platform. For me, as somebody who's going to teach about this place or, research about it, to have, and whether it comes from the city or the county, it doesn't, is less important, I think, to me, but that's the value of it.
I'm all about punting to the county to see if they would use TRT for sure. I think, I'm grateful that you put the proposal together and hooked it to us first, if nothing else, than just giving us the chance to review it and kind of put in our 2 cents with objectives. I'm more interested in OHV behavior, recreationist behavior, as opposed to routes. Because like the big conversation was, oh, if you start, passing these noise ordinance, then you're going to lose sales tax dollars. And then we all said, well, how much of our pie is motorized recreation? And understanding recreation behavior, like where do climbers eat, where do bikers eat, where do OHV enthusiasts eat, and shop and stay and that sort of thing. That definitely helps inform us as a city on, and it is nuanced, but it is also bigger picture of how these recreation user groups are impacting our community, both in sales tax dollars, but also in infrastructure needs. But then, like you said at the beginning, the burning question that I have, that I'll continue to have, is how many people are coming, truly, how many visitors do we have in the Moab area, and what are they doing? And one, group that we can't capture is the van life folks that come and use our infrastructure but don't really participate economically in the place. And so how do we capture that? But I'm all for punting to the county if you think that they're interested in.
I think it's worth taking 2 weeks and finding out.
Definitely.
Mike alluded to this, and one thing that I was confused about initially is that this funder is Public Lands Initiative, and then Rob Bishop had a Public Lands Initiative, which was an attempt to do a public lands bill for all of Utah. And so I think those are 2 different things, but since they're both named the same, it's slightly confusing. And I think there's still a little bit of PTSD from the whole Public Lands Initiative process that happened locally. So I don't know if...
I'm ignorant, I'm sorry. I don't
it might
know
be
any
worth
of that
making
history.
that distinction about
this is through the Ag Experiment Station at the university.
So who is the PL, the Public Lands Initiative now? If they're not Mr. Bishop, who are they?
They're a program through Ag Experiment Station.
It's really important to me to find out who they are.
Right. They're on the internet. I looked up this grant program, and there's quite a bit of information. They're legit. They're good.
Mr. Freeman, there's a
They're not that process surrounding Rob Bishop's.
Right. It's just unfortunate that they chose the same name. Yeah.
Well, they may be somebody entirely different. I would still like to know who they are.
Don't hire them to do branding.
If I may ask, though, there's a line in your letter to us, and it says that the largest sum of $50,975 was provided by PLI, largely due to the pledge amount from the city of Moab. I wasn't under the assumption we pledged any money.
When we were putting the proposal together, I went to the mayor and went to Elaine to ask for support letters, which I believe are included in that proposal.
Yeah, and it says that it would come back to us.
Yeah, pending approval at the city council level.
So it's not, you meant sort of the city of Moab, not the city of Moab?
The community of...
Is that what you mean? I mean...
Local partners.
Okay. Yeah, that just was a red flag because I don't remember pledging a match.
It was not pledged.
We haven't.
That's what
In the letter that I wrote, it said that we would support the project and bring and it would come before council for approval.
Oh, no, I know, I'm just saying the letter that he wrote to us, it says that he received the PLI number because a pledge match from the city of Moab.
I do have to have a one-to-one match for that, and, you know, if it doesn't happen here, I get it, but I'll have to find it somewhere else.
They don't care if it comes from the county or the city or a combination
No.
thereof.
Right.
And we were not obligated.
Well, I'm just saying, how
So,
the letter
yeah.
was written, that's the impression that it gives, and so that's, just gave me pause.
Thank you. That
Sorry.
jumped out at me too.
Yeah, okay.
That wasn't my intention, sorry.
So my impression is that destination management or marketing organizations and other resort communities will do sort of baseline characterization of their visitors for both marketing purposes and to track how they change over time. And I don't think that's really happened here. Would your work be able to provide that information for the travel council or at least inform it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would. Who are you? Where are you from? Why did you come here? When did you decide?
Yeah. So beyond just the spotlight data that they have explicitly agreed to fund, there's potentially significant value in terms of ongoing marketing efforts.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, good to know.
Yeah, I would think so. I mean, it's just knowing who's here. Yeah, the mobile device data does tell you where the zip code is that the person lives, so you know kind of how far they've traveled and that sort of thing.
Yeah, great.
Oops, sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was just going to say that the survey work would reach out to lots of different. It wouldn't be just OHV. It's climbers and bikers and pleasure drivers, and kind of broad continuum.
Would you entertain a motion to table this for 2 weeks until we can approach the county? Or
Yeah, I mean, another option is just not, not past what's proposed to us and move forward with conversations with, allowing him to have conversations with other people, other funding entities. But, with if there was like a group of us that wanted to come together and be a bigger, support of this proposal, then you would then come back to us with a different type of proposal amount. So I would say a motion to approve it and then it not pass would be more effective than a table.
I mean, I don't want to
Or it fails without a motion.
Well, except I don't want to I don't want to essentially close the door and say we're not willing to fund anything.
Right.
So I'd be more inclined to table and continue our internal conversations.
Okay, well, I will entertain any motion.
do you want to go ahead, Caitlin?
Move to table.
I'll second.
Okay, Ronnie, thanks. All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes 5-0. Thanks, Carly, for putting it together. Thanks, Wayne.
Thank you.
I was dubious, but you kind of won me over with the Yellowstone story, so.
Be dubious. Item 11, approval of bills against the city of Moab.
Well, I was extremely efficient. I went through those little check registers. I got them back to our treasurer, and I didn't write the amounts down.
Oh, no.
But Summer helped me out.
Oh, good. Thank you, Summer.
I even took our treasurer's kids' snacks. I was being so efficient. I move to approve the bills against the city of Moab in the amount of $118,229.41.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Ronnie. All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes 5-0. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Thank you. Is there a second?